Well, welcome everybody. Today's presentation is called "The Mainstream Media as a Military Weapon for Social Engineering and War." We advise our audience here to please look for yourself, and Washington, D.C. is counting on you not verifying this information. Please fact check the materials here. There is a lot of factual information, and we always ask people to look for themselves. It's the only way that you can verify such a big puzzle. Today's presentation on how the media has been lying to us, sometimes with actors and whole setups to trick all of us into war. We want to warn the viewers that there is some graphic language. Is not too bad, but just be aware of that. And I always guide myself with this thought from Bill Cooper, an ex-Navy intelligence officer. Listen to everybody, read everything, and believe nothing until you can prove it with your own research. In other words, don't trust anybody. Just look for yourself and see. Sometimes the truth lies somewhere in between the extremes. A little bit of who I am. I'm a mechanical engineer by training. Worked for the Department of Defense for about 4 years and a defense contractor. My political orientation is currently I don't vote. I'm very disappointed with the current political system. I'm an ex-Democrat. I've never voted for a Republican. And I'm registered as an independent, but still I refuse to vote until money is removed from politics. That's what my political background is. A brief outline of this presentation. We're going to be talking why is the mainstream media such a powerful force used to engineer consent, and what tools do they use, including their connections to military psyops. We will look at how the Nazis effectively use racism to manipulate the public to go after certain segments of their population, including political enemies and the Jews, and the parallels to today's right and left media. We will catch Fox, CNN, BBC, and MSNBC using actors and editing videos to change the story in favor of war and to demonize third parties and the role of Hollywood leaked sex videos in war propaganda. We will examine the origins of the term conspiracy theories as a pejorative, and we're going to take a look at CIA memo 1035-960. It was an interagency memo during the Warren Commission on the assassination of John F. Kennedy. That's where they started using this term of conspiracy theories to ridicule people who ask questions about the official stories. I provide links so that you can go quickly and read all these original documents, and links to all the videos that we're going to be presenting here that have been put together by various activists out there. We're going to be also talking about the NDAA 2013 that Obama signed into law, which legalizes propaganda and lies against the American people, overturning a previously existing law that prohibited. We're going to be talking about the role of the media in shaping current geopolitics, and we will provide evidence that Obama's wars were planned 10 years ago. Here at our PCC Studies Club, we look at factual and historical non-contested information to create public awareness. Our members come from very diverse backgrounds, from current military personnel to law enforcement to academics. We are also joined by progressive libertarians, independents like Marvin Saines, who ran for U.S. Senate, and of course those Democrats and Republicans that are starting to realize that something smells funny. This presentation is particularly important because the mainstream media create trends and they influence opinions. They shape social attitudes. They create awareness and also distractions when needed. And it has been a very powerful political tool for centuries. What I'm about to show you is not only will challenge your belief system, it is also far more entertaining than any show you could be watching right now, like House of Cards or Scandal. You'll be hooked on it if you do your own research. It's very, very interesting to research. This is not the story, but the reality of how the real power brokers behind the scenes manipulate your emotions and exploit your beliefs by feeding you fabricated news and blatant lies, literally. Please, I invite you to stay with us for at least the next 35 minutes. The presentation is a little longer, but the first 35 minutes, you will see it for yourself. To see for yourself the overwhelming amount of evidence that shows that we are all tricked into war and hate. And with this, we're going to proceed with the first video. We're going to spend the first 35 minutes on this slide going through some of these videos, and if you feel that you had enough, you can stop at that point. But the presentation, I think, is very, very interesting. We're going to look at the first video here, the top 10 staged media events.
Now we're some health news. You know the old expression, don't worry, be happy?
Don't worry, be happy.
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 Don't worry, be happy. Don't worry, be happy.
Don't worry, be happy.
Don't worry, be happy.
Don't worry, be happy.
Don't worry, be happy.
Don't worry, be happy.
Don't worry, be happy.
Don't worry, be happy.
Don't worry, be happy.
Ashley Banfield from a parking lot in Phoenix reporting via satellite with Nancy Grace, who seemed to be in the same parking lot in Phoenix. I'm basing that, of course, on the fact that the cars that are passing by Ashley Banfield's location box also appear to be passing directly into Nancy Grace's box.
In consumer news, economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
After faking a news conference, instead of facing the usual grilling from journalists, the Emergency Management Agency had its own employees, you see them sitting down right there, pretend to be reporters and ask the questions. Well, now the White House is responding.
It is not a practice that we would employ here at the White House, or that we certainly don't condone it. We didn't know about it beforehand. FEMA has issued an apology saying that they had an error in judgment when they were attempting to try to get out a lot of information to reporters who were asking for answers to a variety of questions in regards to the wildfires in California. It's not something I would have condoned, and I'm sure will not do it again.
Could this be the end of email overload?
Could this be the end of email overload?
Could this be the end of email overload?
Could this be the end of...
We're going now to Saudi Arabia and Charles Jaco. Charles, are you still hearing me? Charles
yes,
Jaco is just
the air raid sirens are just now going off here near these U.S. bases in Saudi Arabia. We've sent the entire camera crews inside right now. We're all preparing to put on our gas masks, as we've been told. There are sounds of planes overhead. We don't know whose planes there are, but air raid sirens are going off insistently. There are military convoys on both sides of me. We're being told to get off this platform and get inside into the air raid shelter immediately. But right now, everyone's been training for this, and it looks like we may have to.
All right, Charles Jaco, that doesn't mean that he is in any imminent danger. Of course, we can't know that.
CD, if you need to take cover, I notice that you've got your gas mask in your hands. If you need to put it on, please do so. If you need to take cover.
People are looking up in the skies, scanning the skies to see what they can see. Hi, Atlanta. We're about to have a short course in missile identification. This is a Scud. You can tell it by its distinctive label. Now, when the missile is launched, the first thing you look for is the plume sticking out behind it. Now, when you detect this, you can tell it's been launched. Thank you.
Graffiti on it? Yeah, show me graffiti.
Larry King show or bust. Je suis un journaliste américain. Wolf. Woof. Oh, I love this country so much.
You guys just don't have a clue.
Well, Cheryl, it was almost exactly 2 hours ago when the sirens went off here in Saudi Arabia. Where we are in eastern Saudi Arabia, there was no problem. Now, let me just size my mask and fit it for a second, just like I always do. Stand by, please. All clear. They're... Shh. What are they saying? Are they saying all clear?
Yes, ma'am. I can't hear.
Were they saying all clear down there just now?
Hear it. Understand. Okay.
All clear. All clear. Está bien was a false alarm. Got that, Atlanta? Standing down now. I'm gonna go get my hamburger and my coffee.
Good. We just got the all clear.
All clear. Every time I order something, this happens. All clear. Thank you.
Do you have any people paid by the CIA who are working for television networks?
This, I think, gets into the kind of getting into the details, Mr. Chairman, that I'd like to get into in executive session.
U.S. President George Herbert Walker Bush pushes for a land war against Iraq. But polls show the U.S. public is split 50-50 on that idea. Then comes this eyewitness testimony before a congressional committee from a 15-year-old Kuwaiti girl. The claim is she cannot be identified for fear of reprisals.
While I was there, I saw the Iraqi soldiers come into the hospital with guns. They took the babies out of the incubators, and left the children to die on the cold floor.
The U.S. public is outraged. The result? Support for land war zooms. It's a turning point. Desert Storm is launched. 135,000 Iraqis are killed. An estimated 1 million Iraqis, many of them children and old people, then die as a result of 10 years of sanctions. One small problem. There never were any incubator baby deaths, not one. The Canadian Broadcasting Corporation's investigative flagship program, The Fifth Estate, reveals the girl to be the Kuwaiti ambassador's daughter, given her lines and coached in acting by the giant American PR firm Hill & Knowlton. It's one phase in a $10 million joint U.S.-Kuwaiti campaign of deception. This man is lying.
I myself buried 14 newborn babies that had been taken from their incubators.
This man is lying.
And they had kids in incubators, and they were thrown out of the incubators so that Kuwait could be systematically dismantled.
There were a lot of people who participated in a conspiracy. Yes, an out-and-out conspiracy of fake organizations, false documents, fraud, and disinformation.
Do you have any people being paid by the CIA who are contributing to the national news services, AP and UPI?
Well, again, I think we're getting into the kind of detail, Mr. Chairman, that I'd prefer to handle in executive session.
I'm Ray McGovern, a 27-year veteran of the Central Intelligence Agency. Why did you lie to get us into a war that was not necessary and that has caused these kinds of casualties?
Ruh-roh.
First of all, I haven't lied.
Oh, he didn't lie. All right, well, that settles it, everybody. There's pound cake in the back. We can all have a nice time, and...
It appears that there were not weapons of mass destruction there.
You said you knew where they were.
I did not.
See? He never said he knew where they were.
We know where they are. They're in the area around Tikrit and Baghdad and east, west, south, and north somewhat.
So the Secretary of Defense caught in a contradiction about weapons of mass destruction. Surely that will be a big story.
How much of an axe do you have to grind with Secretary Rumsfeld?
But he wasn't just any heckler.
Were you nervous? Tucker, I resent the word heckler. I'd like you to take that back.
Okay, I'm not taking it back.
Donald Rumsfeld encouraged whoever, I think, had their hands on you at the time to let you stay there. Does he get any credit for that today?
Isn't it enough that he was wrong and had bad judgment? Why does he have to be a liar, too?
Well, you know, that's the question you'd have to direct to him.
But won't.
Right after 9/11, people were asked about Iraq, and only about 16% felt Saddam Hussein had anything to do with it. But with all of this propaganda coming out, Cheney and all those folks, about 28% believed that Iraq had something to do with it. 2 years after we invaded Iraq, close to 60%, 56% of Americans believed a delusion.
What did Iraq have to do with what?
The attack on the World Trade Center.
Nothing.
There are 5 giant multinational corporations who control all 14,000, virtually all 14,000 radio stations in America, all 5,000 television stations, 80% of our newspapers, all of our billboards, and most of the large internet content providers. So there are 5 guys who are deciding what we hear as news and information.
Iraq's continued defiance of the community of nations presents a challenge which must be addressed.
Presents a challenge which must
The member for Grindler.
It is inherently
dangerous to allow a country such as
Iraq to retain weapons of mass destruction,
particularly in the light
of its past aggressive behaviour.
If the world community fails to disarm Iraq, we fear that other rogue states will be encouraged to believe that they too can have these weapons.
Whitney Houston died in a swimming pool. She had more than twice as much coverage on primetime TV than 250,000 people who died in Haiti. Lance Armstrong was involved in a doping scandal. Oh, my God. Almost 3 times more attention than we gave to the death of 250,000 people in Haiti. So 3 years after the Haiti quake, there are 378,000 Haitians who are still living in tents. Our Wolf Blitzer is not covering that story, okay? He's busy trying to entertain us.
So now with Pawlenty dropping out, Rick Perry dropping in, and Michelle Bachmann and Ron Paul dominating the Ames straw poll, we got ourselves a race.
We have a top tier. It is Mitt Romney, Rick Perry, and Michelle Bachmann.
We have a new top tier, and it's Perry, Mitt Romney, and Bachmann.
There's now a top tier in this race, at least for now, of Romney, Perry, and Bachmann.
I mean, I think that's fair to say. Really fair to say? You're not forgetting, I don't know, anyone, say an ideologically consistent 12-term congressman who came within less than 200 votes of winning the straw poll? Isn't anyone going to give that gentleman a little love?
There's a top tier now of Bachmann and Perry and Romney, and, you know, we haven't mentioned, and we should.
Thank you.
We haven't mentioned, and we should, Rick Santorum, who did really surprisingly well for the amount of money and resources he had.
Rick Santorum? He didn't get half of what Ron Paul got. He lost to the guy who lost so bad he dropped out of the race. Santorum?
We're looking at Mitt Romney, who continues to be the front runner, but we have Rick Perry as well, and now Michelle Bachmann. Let's not count out John Huntsman, though.
What? John Huntsman? Huntsman got 69 votes. If all of John Huntsman's supporters met at the same Ames, Iowa Quiznos, the fire marshal would say, yeah, that's fine, no problem. There's still some tables open in the back. Huntsman was the only Mormon running in the straw poll, and he came in second amongst Mormons. And by the way, this pretending Ron Paul doesn't exist for some reason has been going on for weeks.
A new Gallup survey showing Rick Perry running second to Mitt Romney, knocking down Iowa favorite Michelle Bachmann to 4th.
Behind who? 4th behind who? How did Libertarian Ron Paul become the 13th floor in a hotel? Why? What What's wrong with, he is Tea Party patient zero. All that small government grassroots business, he planted that grass. These other folks, they're just moral majorities in a tri-cornered hat. Ron Paul's the real deal, and Fox News should love this guy. But watch the disconnect between the debate moderators at Fox's Thursday debate and the debate audience.
Iran does not have an air force that can come here, just like we did in Iraq. Build up the war propaganda. There was no Al-Qaeda in Iraq, and they had nuclear weapons, and we had to go in. I'm sure you supported that war as well. Yeah. Okay. It's time we quit this. It's time. It's trillions of dollars we're spending on these wars.
What's with the smirk and the eye roll? The crowd goes nuts and you do one of these. There goes crazy Uncle Ron, babbling about the unsustainability of multiple wars. He's the one guy in the field, agree with him or don't agree with him, who doesn't go out of his way to regurgitate talking points or change what he believes to fit the audience he's in front of. And you're treating him like if this were Celebrity Apprentice, he'd be this guy. By the way, at the Ames, Iowa straw poll, Busey beat Huntsman 77-69. And even when the media does remember Ron Paul, it's only to reassure themselves how there's no need to remember Ron Paul.
Right now, live, right next to the bus behind us, Ron Paul is speaking. And 7 of the candidates are here today. We have live pictures of Ron Paul, but you know what? We're talking about Sarah Palin and we're talking about Rick Perry, the two people not in the race yet, Drew.
And guess what, Paul? If you get video of Sarah Palin or get a soundbite from her, bring that back to us. You can hold the Ron Paul stuff.
Your administration continues to make the use of video news releases, which are prepackaged news stories sent to television stations, fully aware that some or many of these stations will air them without any disclaimer that they are produced by the government. Comptroller General of the United States this week said that raises ethical questions. Does it raise ethical questions about the use of government money to produce stories about the government that wind up being aired with no disclosure that they were produced by the government?
There is a Justice Department opinion that says these pieces are within the law so long as they're based upon facts, not advocacy.
Jane, what more can you tell us about the Salomon Brothers building and its collapse?
Well, only really what you already know. Details are very, very sketchy. As you can see behind me, the Trade Center appears to be still burning. We see these huge clouds of smoke and ash, and we know that behind that there's an empty piece of what was a very familiar New York skyline. 1,500 people are being treated.
The collapse of World Trade Center 7 on 9/11 was a rare event. Our study has identified thermal expansion as a new phenomenon that can cause the collapse of a structure.
I scream, you scream, you know the rest.
I scream, you scream.
You know the rest.
I scream, you scream. You know the rest.
We received an order from one of Murdoch's apparatchiks, if you will, that we should cut away from our newscast and start carrying a fawning tribute to Ronald Reagan that was airing at the Republican convention. We were stunned because up until that point we were allowed to do legitimate news, and suddenly we were ordered from the top to carry propaganda, carry Republican right-wing propaganda.
The U.S. State Department calls him one of the most significant financial sponsors of Islamic extremism in the world.
Supposedly, a CNN reporter found Osama bin Laden, took a television camera crew with him.
He is a major terrorist financier.
Went into Osama bin Laden's hideout.
We are put in a minivan with curtained windows and drive west. As night falls, we move to a four-wheel drive vehicle that makes its way up a rough mountain path past checkpoints manned by heavily armed men.
Interviewed him and his top leadership, his top lieutenants and colonels and generals in their hideout.
Mr. bin Laden, you have declared a jihad against the United States. Can you tell us why?
The US government has committed acts that are extremely unjust, hideous and criminal through its support of the Israeli occupation of Palestine. And we believe the US is directly responsible for those killed in Palestine, Lebanon and Iraq.
This is a CNN reporter with a camera crew. And he came out and told everybody, within 3 weeks, Osama bin Laden is going to attack the United States and Israel. Now, don't you think that's kind of strange, folks? You see, because the largest intelligence apparatus in the world, with the biggest budget in the history of the world, has been looking for Osama bin Laden for years and years and years, and can't find him. Some doofus, jerk-off reporter with a camera crew waltzes right into his hideout and interviews him. Now, that tells us two things. Either everyone in the intelligence community and all of the intelligence agencies of the United States government are blithering idiots and incompetent fools, including the entire apparatus of the FBI and all of their personnel, or they're lying to us. They're not looking for him at all.
I suspect your research has discovered the memoranda that were written by John Moody and by Roger in terms of setting the tone for the day. The message of the day is a very political device.
Let's spend a good deal of time on the battle over judicial nominations, which the President will address this morning. Nominees who both sides admit are qualified are being held up because of their possible, not demonstrated, views on one issue, abortion. This should be a trademark issue for FNC today and in the days to come.
There was nothing covert about the way the managing editors in New York or Washington operated. They made it perfectly clear what they expected from us.
The so-called 9/11 Commission has already been meeting. This is not what did he know and when did he know it stuff. Do not turn this into Watergate.
Every morning there was a detailed list of subjects to talk about, not talk about.
Kerry's speech on the economy at Georgetown is likely to move onto the topic of Iraq. We should take the beginning of the Kerry speech and see if other news at the time is more compelling. It is not required to take it start to finish.
They were just actually issuing edicts to the reporters to control what they could say and how they could say it.
Let's refer to the U.S. Marines we see in the foreground as sharpshooters, not snipers, which carries a negative connotation.
When headquarters sent a memo every morning and said, we want to touch on the following issues, we want to cover the following stories, we want to do them in this particular way, our job and our objective then was to execute the plan.
The pictures from Abu Ghraib prison are disturbing. Today we have a picture, aired on Al Arabiya, of an American hostage being held with a scarf over his eyes, clearly against his will. Who's outraged on his behalf?
So here's just a segment of stuff that will never appear on American television.
يضربوا المدنيين يعني؟
ايه مدنيين هي كلها هذا بيت عمنا كله مدنيين لك عسكريين كله مدنيين يضربون من الله ينتقم منهم حسبي الله ونعم الوكيل حسبي الله ونعم الوكيل 5 جنازات من جنازات فقط بيت يا الله يا الله يا الله يا الله الله انتقم منهم الله خلحقنا منهم وينك الله وينك الله.
So there are 100,000 stories like that that simply do not get into our consciousness, and so we remain kind of immune from having to deal with the consequences of our collective behavior.
The documentary that we just saw a clip of never aired. It never aired on CNN International. Why not?
Well, I still haven't been given an exact reason as to why it didn't air. I went and visited with the president of CNN International, Tony Maddox, twice on behalf of my dumbfounded crew, and we were never given an answer. And so I started investigating the situation, Liz, after several employees who'd been at the network for years approached me and said, you need to look into this. There's something going on. It's very strange. They're not airing your documentary. And after some investigation, we found out that CNN International is actually making money from the Bahrain regime. They are a customer of Bahrain. Bahrain is paying CNN International to create content that shows Bahrain in a favorable light, and then air, also not only to create that content, Liz, to then air that content on CNN International. And in one of the shows, it was called I List Bahrain. It was back in 2010. It was sponsored by Bahrain. And Richard Quest was live from the country for a week talking about the Formula One race and how progressive Bahrain was and how the Crown Prince was a reformer. Well, we saw in February 2011 that under the Crown Prince's rule, the military troops shot and killed unarmed protesters in broad daylight. And this is very dangerous because what CNN is doing, and they're not only taking money from just Bahrain, they've also produced similar content for Georgia, Kazakhstan, and other nations as well, Lebanon. And what makes this dangerous is they're not disclosing to the viewers that these sponsored programs are actually being sponsored. Or if they are disclosing it, it's in very small gray lettering at the bottom of the article.
Whether it's CNN or CBS or NBC, it's all fiction. People making this junk know that. The viewers suspect it, but where are they going to turn to?
This one is short.
It's Cyber Monday, a day on the retail calendar that can be enjoyed from a desk or the couch.
Enjoyed from a desk or a couch.
Enjoyed from a desk or maybe the couch.
Enjoyed from a desk or the couch.
Enjoyed from a desk or the couch.
Enjoyed from the desk or even the couch.
Enjoyed from a desk or the couch.
From a desk or the couch. From a desk or the couch.
From a desk or a couch.
From a desk or your couch. From the desk or the couch. From your desk or the couch.
From a desk or the couch.
From a desk or a couch.
From your desk or the couch. From a desk or the couch.
From a desk or couch.
From a desk or the couch. From a desk or even the couch. From a desk or the couch.
Enjoy from a desk or a couch.
From a desk
or the couch.
From a desk or the couch. Or wherever you like, as long as you got internet.
I want the young motherfuckers in here tonight, no matter what your nationality is. Turn the motherfucking TV off for 1 week and see if you can survive. Motherfuckers are going to a television junkie motherfucking mode. Nigga, ain't no TV. I need my remote, nigga. I'm jonesing. Nigga, it's called television programming. They telling you visually to program. You being programmed, nigga. You watch it on the news. It was on CNN, it's true. I seen it on Fox. It's real. It's bullshit.
That was it. It was this one was short. And the next one, we're gonna go straight to the next one.
Stunning
fakery in the alleged chemical weapons attack, according to a former UK ambassador. Coming up.
The British Broadcasting Corporation is accused of staging chemical weapons attack. The CIA admits planting CNN reporters. And international lawyers call for journalists inciting violence to be expelled.
August 2013, and NATO leaders can't get the public on side for the imminent bombing of Syria. Suddenly, the BBC says it was filming a small rural hospital, and a game-changing atrocity happens right there, the moment they were filming.
Last month, we were filming the doctors working at this hospital when victims of an incendiary bomb attack on a school playground started pouring in.
Absolute chaos and carnage here. It must be some sort of napalm.
But a highly sceptical public stayed hostile to military intervention. Exactly 1 month later, the leaders are trying to pin a chemical weapons attack on Syria without success. The BBC airs exactly the same footage but digitally alters the word napalm for, quote, chemical weapons, hoping no one will notice.
Absolute chaos and carnage here. It must be some sort of chemical weapon.
Not only did folks notice, but it unleashed a massive public investigation, which made some extremely disturbing findings.
This is the total fabrication. From beginning to end of an atrocity with BBC reporter Ian Pannell standing amidst a tableau of very bad actors. This is completely beyond the pale.
This audio analysis by media investigator Robin Upton shows both versions are identical and from the same speech. The BBC then digitally altered the words from napalm to chemical weapon, the exact justification NATO was finding difficult to prove. That game-changing allegation was made by 2 doctors that had travelled with the BBC, who claimed the number of sudden casualties is, quote, overwhelming. What kind of doctor, notes media investigator Robert Stewart, gives interviews when she is surrounded by supposedly seriously burned and dying teenagers?
Get anyone who isn't a patient out of here.
When a nurse does finally start to help, her order to get anyone who isn't a patient out of here doesn't apply to the cameramen. Even worse, notes Stewart, is the bizarre acting which starts when the man in the centre gives the sign.
What do you need to see? We are just human beings. We want to live, you know? Isn't it our right to live?
Dr. Roller, on whose sole claim the BBC sends napalm chemical weapons allegations around the world, is actually the daughter of Syrian rebel Musa al-Qadi. The parallel to the Gulf War and nurse Naira is stunning. Congressman said the nurse's tearful testimony that Iraqis were killing children swung their vote in favour of war.
Took the incubators and left the children to die on the cold floor.
Nurse Naira became the mainstream's darling, but once the vote had safely passed, she admitted inventing the whole thing and was actually the daughter of the Kuwaiti ambassador to Washington, lying to get the public to back war. UK Member of Parliament George Galloway joins us. Thank you very much for coming on. Why do we get almost identical claims before each war, which then prove lies?
Well, the Bush and Blair Corporation, as it became in the run-up to the Iraq War, has almost entirely lost its reputation for journalistic integrity. A full inquiry must be launched into why the BBC used a piece of material which was not just wrong, but was falsified, and falsified with the purpose of propelling our country into war. That's not what the British public pays its BBC licence fee for, so that it can be tricked into a war.
In a statement, the British Broadcasting Corporation says it stands by its report. The Syrian opposition denies the allegations. Investigators such as Robert Stewart note there are many questions sent officially to the corporation remain unanswered. There are also numerous such precedents, both in this war and previous invasions. Brilliant is how a top Western official called tricking the public through routine faking of atrocities and commonly aired on mainstream bulletins. Nightly news shows just a few cases of what happened next after mainstream cameras ended their reports.
It shows people putting on, fake wounds. It shows there's some guys there. Look, there's their head wounds. Peace, everybody. We're doing the right thing. We're creating fake propaganda. I mean, it's not even real atrocities. So they're there lined up. There was another video. It shows some guy kicking his leg and with a fake blood wound. Here's a guy who wakes up from his funeral. Watch this. They're reading. Oh, there. Oh, wait. There. Oh, he's awake. He's not even really dead. And so, I mean, this is just crazy what goes on. There was another video that was shot of a supposed massacre, and it cuts. You don't see the whole thing. When you go to the Al Jazeera footage, it shows real quick clips of a guy kicking his leg, and he's got blood coming out, which turned out to be fake blood.
The so-called activists behind the fakes are by far the most popular source, despite them never being verified and regularly disproved as fabrications to justify more NATO arms. The term activist may sound like a well-meaning Western campaigner or charity, but the Foreign Policy Journal notes it's just newspeak for insurgents. The official source on Syria casualties, or what mainstream claims is official, is impressive-sounding organisation the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights. Reuters exposed the fact 3 years ago it was not an organisation at all, or even working in Syria. It's a single pro-insurgent supporter living in Coventry, England. Here pictured at the Foreign Office after instructions from Britain's Foreign Minister himself. In leaked footage, ordinary Syrians told the BBC they're tired of its lies and the insurgents they're cheerleading are a tiny minority led by foreign gangs.
You don't like BBC?
BBC كله.
Why?
سيء. لا يعني BBC سيء. Because you are talking very bad about Syria. Everybody when BBC Arabic he can hear the lie about Syria. Al Jazeera and Al Arabiya.
But maybe Syria is like any country. Some people support and some people don't support.
No, everybody has support.
So Syria is different.
There is very little people. Maybe 10,000 like that. But the most of people, 22 million, 23 million persons support Bashar al-Assad.
But even
and we have not demonstration, we have armed gangs.
Pro-war media is forced to resort to colossal lies since intelligence chiefs revealed to America's top investigative reporter, Cy Hirsch, quote, Obama's cronies are making it up. All the evidence actually points to the jihadis staging the chemical attacks.
The attack was not the result of the current regime, the high-level intelligence officer wrote in an email to a colleague. The guys are throwing their hands in the air and saying, how can we help this guy, Obama, when he and his cronies in the White House make up the intelligence as they go along, said a former senior intelligence official. The distortion, he said, reminded him of the Gulf of Tonkin incident.
What?
The president wants a white one.
He wants a white one? A white? Let me talk.
He's mobilizing the 6th Fleet.
The thought a US president would start a horrific foreign war by staging a pretty female front as a victim made people laugh.
The young Albanian national fleeing in this video is attempting to escape terrorist reprisals in her village.
Meet Julia, if that's her real name, the celebrated face mass media call the creator of a viral video asking the US to help Ukraine. It was actually created by the State Department's National Endowment for Democracy to mask the fact Washington joined Ukraine's thugs and murdered their way to power. A leaked phone call with EU Foreign Minister Ashton revealed the opposition planned and executed the infamous sniper violence of Kiev, shooting both the police and their own supporters in the back. Study found a total of 250 mainstream sources lied that the snipers belonged to Yanukovych. Only 7 of the entire mass media even mentioned the bombshell leak, and those that did framed the report to suggest it couldn't possibly be true. Former Wall Street Journal editor Paul Craig Roberts calls the coverage of Ukraine a new low in the history of the mainstream, which is now simply what he describes as a ministry of lies. Investigative reporter John Helmer's uncovered the mainstream staging demonstrations and attempts to provoke disorder. He joins us. Great to speak to you. One US scholar notes the coverage has now become Orwellian. What's going on?
So the weaker your government, the more interested the leader might be in threatening Russia to look strong at home when it's obvious he's not strong at home and couldn't get re-elected. That's particularly true, let's say, of the French president or the Prime Minister Cameron at the moment. And arguably, President Obama is not only a lame duck, but having great difficulty in putting together a winning coalition for the Democratic Party's next candidate for president. When you've got weak political leaders, you need to look stronger than you are in public opinion in the media. So there's this process of misleading and disinforming.
The Senate committee inquiry revealed CIA running mainstream media in the vast operation known as Mockingbird. More than 400 journalists and media chiefs claiming to watchdog the government, with the exact opposite joining to mask US government crime at home and abroad. The operation continues despite agency denials. Counterpunch discovered CIA imposing agents on firms like CNN. Former CIA exec Michael Schur notes British media are even closer to Intel targets.
Big pieces of wood, metal, to use as barricades.
Schur adds the BBC now takes the lead in regime change operations that cause, quote, anarchy and violence. Let's speak to Francis Boyle, Professor of International Law at Illinois University. Great to talk to you. How can nations stop war media that now perform the CIA's covert operations?
Certainly have their visas revoked and sent packing home, because I really don't understand why some of these countries keep, European journalists, certainly in the United States, why they let them into the countries. Because they're just using their coverage to promote war and military intervention at home. In addition, Bush Jr. administration lifted what was supposed to be the previous prohibition that intelligence agents were not supposed to infiltrate the media. You know, you have to be very careful, certainly dealing with U.S. reporters, whether or not they're intelligence agents.
Banning active units of the military, also known as war stream media, shows how serious the situation now is. Their policies aren't popular with their own viewers. Mainstream audiences are in free fall. CNN and MSNBC have shed half their entire viewership in the last year alone. The question is, how many more coups will they stage or help before they lose the public's trust altogether? Seek truth from facts. This is The Truth Seeker.
I'm going to have one more video to show you, and then we'll go into the slides.
In this video, we're going to show you evidence that the Syrian government was framed in the chemical weapons attack of August 21st, 2013. We're going to explain why they were framed, and we're going to propose a course of action. The use of chemical weapons on civilians in the Syrian conflict was a crime against humanity. As such, it should be the subject of a real criminal investigation, and those responsible should be brought to justice. However, if the US and NATO have their way, that's not going to happen. In their book, a simple accusation is as good as a conviction, and therefore there's no point providing any real evidence. Let's just skip right to the missile strikes, shall we? This isn't really surprising to anyone who's been paying attention, though. The United States has had Syria and Iran in their crosshairs for a long time. The plans for these wars have been in the works for over a decade.
About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people on the joint staff who used to work for me. And one of the generals called me in. He said, "Sir, you got to come in. You got to come in and talk to me a second." I said, "Well, you're too busy." He said, "No." He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." This was on or about the 20th of September. I said, "We're going to war with Iraq. Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I guess they don't know what else to do." So I said, "Well, did they find some information connecting Saddam to Al-Qaeda?" He said, No, he says there's nothing new that way. They've just made the decision to go to war with Iraq. He said, I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we've got a good military and we can take down governments. And he said, I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail. So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, are we still going to war with Iraq? And he said, oh, it's worse than that. He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, and he said, I just got this down from upstairs, meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, this is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran.
There are 3 primary psychological techniques that the powers that be in any given era use to build up the public support needed to take a country to war. 1. Create the impression that the aggressor is actually acting in self-defense, or in defense of a helpless nation. This can be done by exaggerating the danger posed by an enemy, fabricating an attack and blaming it on the enemy, or intentionally provoking the enemy into a response. 2. Build up a crusade mythology, one that presents the aggressors as fighting for a higher ideal, or for the good of all humanity. In our current era, the meme of spreading democracy, fighting terrorism, or defending human rights are the most commonly used. 3. Dehumanize the enemy. War is mass murder. Therefore, presenting the enemy as evil, barbaric, or subhuman is essential unless you want your citizens and your soldiers questioning the morality of their actions. This pattern is often supported and augmented by a sense of cultural or racial superiority. The way Islamophobia is capitalized on to build moral support for this phony war on terror is a perfect example. The U.S. government has a long, illustrious history of using these techniques, and they keep using them because they work.
I frankly think that crisis initiation is really tough. And it's very hard for me to see how the United States president can get us to war with Iran. Which leads me to conclude that if, in fact, compromise is not coming, that the traditional way of America gets to war is what would be best for U.S. interests. Some people might think that Mr. Roosevelt wanted to get us into World War II, as David mentioned. You may recall we had to wait for Pearl Harbor. Some people might think Mr. Wilson wanted to get us into World War I. You may recall he had to wait for the Lusitania episode. Some people might think that Mr. Johnson wanted to send troops to Vietnam. You may recall he had to wait for the Gulf of Tonkin episode. We didn't go to war with Spain until the until the Maine exploded. And may I point out that Mr. Lincoln did not feel he could call out the Federal Army until Fort Sumter was attacked, which is why he ordered the commander at Fort Sumter to do exactly that thing which the South Carolinians had said would cause an attack. So if, in fact, the Iranians aren't going to compromise, it would be best if somebody else started the war. One can combine other means of pressure with sanctions. I mentioned that explosion on August 17th. We could step up the pressure. I mean, look, people, Iranian submarines periodically go down. Someday one of them might not come up. Who would know why? We can do a variety of things if we wish to increase the pressure. I'm not advocating that, but I'm just suggesting that this is not a either-or proposition. Of, it's just sanctions has to succeed or other things. We are in the game of using covert means against the Iranians. We could get nastier at that.
The United States has been trying to get Iran under its thumb for a long time. In 1953, the CIA and the UK's MI6 organized a coup to topple the democratically elected Prime Minister of Iran, Mohammad Mossadegh. They then installed the Shah as their puppet. The Shah, who just also happened to be a brutal dictator, ruled until 1979, when he was overthrown during the Iranian Revolution. The US didn't like that, so they tried to take Iran down by arming and funding Saddam Hussein against the Iranians. This was during the Iranian-Iraq War, which is also sometimes referred to as the First Persian Gulf War, which lasted from 1980 to 1988. The U.S. continued its support for Iraq even though they knew full well that he was using chemical weapons against the Iranians. This now declassified top-secret memo from November 4, 1983, documents chemical weapons used by Iraq and discusses Iran's likely reactions. Here's a second memo written on February 24, 1984 to the Director of Central Intelligence, predicting that Iraq will use nerve agents against Iran. Note that the source of these documents is Foreign Policy Magazine, which is an extremely pro-establishment publication by any standards. In spite of this, friendly diplomatic relations between the U.S. and Saddam continued. This video of Donald Rumsfeld, then Special Envoy of President Ronald Reagan, meeting with Saddam was taken on December 20th, 1983, which was after the first memo. This means that those running the U.S. knew Saddam was killing people with poison gas And they didn't care. Taking down Iran was more important to the US government than protecting human rights. And it still is. Saddam failed to defeat Iran, so the US switched tactics. And for a long time they tried to go after Iran directly by accusing them of building nuclear weapons in order to justify military strikes. However, this line of worn-out propaganda didn't gain any traction, largely because the US government had lost most of its credibility in their trumped-up claims about Iraq's weapons of mass destruction. You can only cry wolf so many times before people start rolling their eyes. Their agenda fell apart completely when elements within the CIA and Mossad came forward stating that there was no evidence that Iran even intended to build such a weapon. Not to be deterred by little details like the truth, these chicken hawk neocons decided to go after Syria to get to Iran. They know that Syria and Iran have a mutual defense agreement, and if NATO forces enter Syria, Iran will be drawn into the fight. And then these little deranged psychopaths in suits will get their war. We still have to maintain appearances, though. We wouldn't want people to think that this is about controlling the world's oil supply and protecting the petrodollar, would we? No, put those crazy conspiracy theories out of your mind. We're here to spread democracy and freedom and to protect human rights with 50 caliber machine guns and drone strikes. If it were obvious that the US was attacking Syria, it would be very difficult to obtain international or domestic support. So rather than attacking Syria directly, the US and NATO have been running a proxy war by arming and funding the Syrian rebels. To obscure the source of this support, US allies in the region such as Qatar and Saudi Arabia have been used to purchase weapons, then route them to Syria via Turkey. This pattern of arming and funding dictators or extremist groups to get them to take down non-cooperative governments has been a key element in America's foreign policy ever since the creation of the CIA after World War II.
We also have a history of kind of moving in and out of Pakistan. I mean, let's remember here, the people we are fighting today, we funded 20 years ago.
Well, let's not just talk about this in a general sense. Who was running that operation?
U.S. National Security Advisor Brzezinski flew to Pakistan to set about rallying resistance. He wanted to arm the Mujahideen without revealing America's role. On the Afghan border near the Khyber Pass, he urged the soldiers of God to redouble their efforts.
We know of their deep belief in God, and we are confident that their struggle will succeed. That land over there is yours. You'll go back to it one day because your fight will prevail and you'll have your homes, your mosques back again because your cause is right and God is on your side.
Just in case you're thinking that this is irrelevant to our current situation, we should point out that Zbigniew Brzezinski is an acknowledged friend and mentor to Barack Obama.
He has proven to be an outstanding friend and somebody who I've learned an immense amount from. And for him to support me in this campaign and then be willing to come out here to Iowa is a testimony to his generosity. So if everybody could please give Dr. Brzezinski another round of applause.
History proves that these dictators and extremists that the U.S. government installs are disposable, and the very qualities that made them useful against enemies are later used to demonize them, thereby providing the justification for a full-on invasion. This should be taken as a warning to those rebel groups that the U.S. is using to destabilize Syria right now. Now, who are these Syrian rebels? This Free Syrian Army that the U.S. government so vocally supports? Well, while the West has tried to paint them as local freedom fighters, the reality is that the conflict has attracted foreign jihadists from multiple countries, many of whom openly declare their intent to replace Assad's secular government with Sharia law. Numerous mainstream reports are already surfacing of Sharia-motivated atrocities committed by the rebels. These reports are backed up by video footage that's far too graphic for me to show here. If you do a Google search, you can find videos of men being beheaded and women being shot. Yet the U.S. government isn't deterred by these details. They still want these extremists to topple the Syrian government. Funny, isn't it, how they require FBI background checks to buy a deer rifle in the States? But if you're a foreign jihadist trying to overthrow a government that Washington isn't on good terms with, they'll send you rocket launchers and heavy artillery with no questions asked. And how do you reconcile the fact that the U.S. is fighting religious extremists in Afghanistan, calling them terrorists, while supporting those same groups in Syria, calling them freedom fighters? It doesn't make sense at all if you take the U.S. government's propaganda at face value. On March 19, 2013, sarin gas was used in Syria near Aleppo. Israel and the U.S. promptly blamed the Syrian government for the attacks, even though many of those who were killed were Syrian government soldiers. Obama began talking about the event as a red line that had been crossed, and the warmongers began their saber-rattling in earnest. However, the UN insisted on investigating the issue themselves, and on May 6, 2013, UN investigator Carla Del Ponte went public stating that evidence from their investigation indicated that it was the Syrian rebels who had used the sarin gas, and that there was no indication that the Syrian government had launched any chemical attacks whatsoever. Russia's UN ambassador, Vitaly Churkin, agreed with Del Ponte after Russian experts visited the location where the projectile struck and took their own samples of the material from the site. Those samples were then analyzed at a Russian laboratory certified by the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons. According to the lab results, they found that the presence of hexogen, utilized as an opening charge, and which is not used in standard chemical munitions, pointed to the attack being launched by the rebels. Rather than cover this development, the mainstream media did what they always do when they don't want the public to look at something. They simply changed the subject. Now, of course, the fact that the US-backed rebels had attempted to frame the Syrian government in order to build support for a NATO invasion would be bad enough. They were trying to start a war of aggression. But let's remember that sarin gas was in fact used, and the United States is supporting those who used it. That makes them an accomplice. You would think that the US would withdraw its support after such an event, but it didn't. In fact, it increased it. In July, the US began openly discussing, quote, kinetic strikes against Syria, as if their lies hadn't been exposed. This, of course, brings us to the attack on August 21st, 2013, where they attempted once again to frame the Syrian government for the use of sarin gas, and once again, they got caught. The first wave of media coverage tried to pin the attack on the Syrian government, and the US and France instantly came out condemning Assad. By August 24th, the Pentagon had already announced plans for missile strikes. But even as they did, their story was already falling apart. The Syrian army came forward that same day with footage to back up their report that they had uncovered a massive chemical weapons cache in rebel tunnels in the Damascus suburb of Jobar. This is the exact neighborhood where the chemical attack took place. Then witnesses came forward with this video footage showing the rebels preparing what appears to be crude chemical weapons rockets for an attack. If you look closely at these rockets, you'll see that the device shown is clearly improvised. This isn't a mass-produced military-grade munition like Assad would have. This is homemade. Reuters acknowledges in this article that photos of rockets matching the description in this clip are currently being examined by experts. These experts say that the rockets in the pictures that they have are, quote, relatively basic with crude stabilizing fins. They also say that they, quote, bear striking resemblance to devices found elsewhere in Syria in the aftermath of much smaller suspected attacks, end quote. If that's the case, and if the UN and Russia have evidence that the rebels were the ones who were behind the first chemical weapons attacks back in March, then what does that tell us? Let's put this case together as a district attorney might when deciding who to prosecute for a crime. Let's establish motive, means, opportunity, and evidence. These are the elements you need to reach a guilty verdict in a court. Who had motive? Not the Syrian government. The Syrian military has been making strong gains this past few months. They didn't need to use chemical weapons. Furthermore, they knew full well that the US and NATO were looking for any excuse to invade, so the last thing that they would want to do is give them that excuse. The rebels, on the other hand, do have motive, since they knew that they could count on the Western media to spin the story in their favor. And that's exactly what's happened. But did the rebels have the means and the opportunity? Actually, yes, they did. On May 31st, 2013, security forces in Turkey found a 2-kilogram cylinder filled with sarin gas after searching the homes of Syrian militants. On July 7th, the Syrian army went public about a chemical lab that they had found belonging to rebels in the city of Banias. In terms of evidence, everything that has been released to the public so far points to the rebels being behind the attack. If the US government has any real evidence to support their side of the story, why don't they produce it? The so-called intel document that they released on August 30th to justify their position doesn't contain any evidence at all. It's just a statement of opinion. They're talking about bombing a nation, taking us into a war that will most likely spin out of control, drawing in Iran, Russia, and China, just based on their word. Both Russia and China have openly sided with Syria and Iran, and Russia has warned that thermonuclear war could result if the US continues down this path. We're talking about World War III here. This is not a game, people. This is by far the most dangerous crossroads we have ever come to in living history. If we let these psychopaths continue taking us down this path, the consequences are too horrific to even contemplate. We've been trying to warn people where we're headed and trying to show you that there's no political solution that will turn the US government around. Voting the bums out is not going to work. The people are going to have to take the power that they've handed over to these madmen back, directly. The first stage of the revolution is the ideological revolution. That means that our first job is to wake people up. To achieve this, we must build networks of awareness. It's time to connect the activist groups, the Facebook pages, the bloggers, the alternative media. It's time to build lines of communication that cross these artificial borders of left and right. It's time to find that common ground, that unifying idea that will enable us to face our common enemy, and which will lay the framework for what comes next. We must reach a critical mass of awakening, because that's when these networks of awareness become networks of resistance. Our network must reach into every aspect of society, especially the police and military. The police and military are the enforcement arm of this mafia. Without them, the powers that be have no power at all. We must show them that they're being tricked, that they are not being sent to fight for freedom. Nor do the American people or the Syrian people want this war. Only 9% of the US population support strikes against Syria. 91% oppose it. Who wants this war? A handful of narcissistic psychopaths and useful idiots. You really want to bleed for them? History will remember the real heroes of this crisis as being the ones that had the courage to face this corrupt chain of command and say, no, I will not comply. Some are already making this stand. Don't leave them standing alone. If you want to understand the real reason we're being taken into these wars, please watch The Road to World War III, a video that we released last year predicting the precise chain of events that we're seeing unfold right now. You want to do something to stop this? Watch Revolution and Instruction Manual and put those instructions into action. Then visit the Get Involved section on our website for more information.
Ready. So now we're going to move forward with the presentation, and thank you very much if you're still with us here. We wanted to show all these videos to show you the pattern of how we've been lied to in many different ways, and often with actors to trick you into war and to thinking things that are not real, and also to play with your emotions, because the people that are doing this know how everything works. They need your support in order to do this kind of thing. So I want to point out here an article of an MIT study that point to the fact that the Syrian rebels did a chemical attack in Syria, and this is Massachusetts Institute of Technology. It's a very credible institution, and my question is, how come the Obama administration or the mainstream media haven't point this out? This is very important. This should be, in the main primetime television scandal. The report is titled "Possible Implications of Faulty U.S. Technical Intelligence," and we're going to see throughout this presentation that they always call it faulty intelligence, and there is more than a clear pattern here to blame it just on the incompetence theory. So when, as we just saw in that previous video, when the lies about the rebels attacking Syria didn't work and the support for the war was very little, what did they do? Well, they came up with fake beheading videos, and that shows you that they are still in charge. They were able to switch public opinion back up to more than 50%, and now the people, the public supports intervention in Syria and fighting ISIS and all these organizations. We're going to talk about a little bit about ISIS and how it was created and in more detail. But here you have an article from the Telegraph. It's a mainstream organization, very respected, and the title here is James Foley murder video may have been staged. So if you go online, and this is an exercise that I advise you to do it with caution, and you want to look at a real beheading, you will see the difference between one or the other. But regardless of, and this is not, by the way, is not the only incident where they have been obviously staging beheadings. There are others, but you just go to show you that you just cannot believe everything that you're told by the mainstream media. That you should question and that you should investigate. And obviously, this takes some time, and that's the problem, because the public doesn't have the time to do all this research and connect all these dots. So it takes time. So what we're trying to do is connect all the dots in a short amount of time so that people can see the pattern, and hopefully, we can do something about it. Propaganda, weaponizing information. People have different perceptions what propaganda is. So I'm going to read a definition from Wikipedia. And by the way, propaganda, there was a term that was created during World War I, I believe, and it got so much negative connotations that the person who created it, his name was Edward Bernays, and he was the nephew of Sigmund Freud, the famous psychologist. He decided to change the name to public relations, and it's the same techniques, same science, same scientific approach to send a message and trick people. And it's very effective. We all know that we are all familiar with the put a let's say a nice looking model, to sell a car, or those kind of things. And the way it works, they raise your emotions, and once you are in that state, it becomes way easier to feed you a message. And I remember hearing, cannot remember the name of the guy, it was a military planner that said that the human mind doesn't have a firewall. And that's exactly right. Once you are in this emotional state, whether it is about politics, religion, war, whatever subject you're looking at, your mind, it compromises your ability to think critically. And it becomes way easier to just send you a message or their point of view. Propaganda is a form of communication aimed towards influencing the attitude of a population towards some cause or position. Propaganda is information that is not impartial and used primarily to influence an audience and further an agenda, often by pressing facts selectively and perhaps by lying by omission. And that's very important. The mainstream media always withhold important facts, as I have a few examples for you, and also shift attention to other subjects. To encourage a particular synthesis or using loaded messages to produce an emotional, this is critical here is the emotional part, rather than a rational response to the information presented. And I heard somebody online saying that propaganda is the art of overwhelming logic. That's exactly right, I think. We have some quotes here from very known, very well-known psychologists. In this case, we have Gerald Pulse. He's the director of a political psychology program at George Washington University. And he said, controlling information and controlling dissent are part of what goes into maintaining a totalitarian state. Psychologists and sociologists who study terrorism say dictators are able to spread fear among their population and place themselves as the only salvation. In manufacturing an external threat, like the Jews to Hitler's Germany or the entire West for Kim, help keep the society off balance and collectively paranoid as well. The dictators also exploit a well-known instinct for most people to seek protection from a strong leader, according to Alice Locicero, a Cambridge, Massachusetts-based clinical psychologist and researcher on leadership and terrorism. Here have some examples of Cold War era propaganda, and it's very interesting to see how they were doing it back then. So low tech. Now, obviously, we are at a much higher high-tech level of sending messages and selling stuff. We see the same principles here. They rely on lies. They rely on racism, fear, and hate. And I want to point out these two cartoons by Dr. Seuss, the person who wrote the books for the kids. They're very, very famous. He drew these cartoons about Japanese citizens. I don't know if how clear you can see it from there, but it's a map of the West Coast, Oregon. You can see Oregon, Washington, California. And there is this booth handing out TNT boxes or explosives to the Japanese population. And there is a guy on top looking out, saying, looking for the signal from home. And the message is, all the Japanese that are living here in the United States are ready to start bombing us and, commit act of terror. So we should be suspicious of them. We have pictures, a drawing of this South Dakota, the mountain where the presidents are carved. I cannot remember the name of the mountain, but what they're doing, what they're saying here, don't let them carve those faces on our mountains. Buy United States saving bonds and stamps. And over here we have another example. Sure, I want to fight communism, but how? The guy said, well, with truth dollars. Send your truth dollars to Washington on top of your taxes. We see the examples in Hollywood. It is an example of a movie. And say, I marry a communist. And cinema and theater are very important also, as we're going to see here. The Nazis perfected these techniques, and everything they learned from the United States. That's where all these psychological techniques were developed. We're going to see pretty soon. Study after study shows that making it a racial, religious, sex, or political issue, in other words, appealing to your emotion, is critical in order to assimilate the message or to market an ideology, because it typically impairs your critical thinking. And here is an example of how they lie by omission. It was a Democrat, liberal Democrat, Harry Truman, who dropped the bomb in Japan, something that I learned just a few years ago that I didn't know, that the Japanese were ready to surrender. And this general cannot remember Eisenhower. Eisenhower talked to Harry Truman, do we really need to do this if they're ready to surrender? And all of this is well documented in many books, but one that I can recommend is Untold History of the United States by Oliver Stone. And essentially, they told the Japanese, we want unconditional surrender. And when the Japanese didn't comply with that, they decided to go ahead and bomb Nagasaki and the other city. So it just goes some distance to show you an example of how they lie by omission. That's important to know, because we didn't need to kill all these people, but we did it anyways, and that's a historical fact. That's how facts are changed in order to portray a picture that is, of how you call it, politically correct to the system. There is also no mention of an economic embargo to Japan as a major contributor to Pearl Harbor. It's a non-contested historical fact also. Nazi propaganda. I want to talk a little bit about this because it's very, very interesting. Same things. They use the same racism, fear, and hate. German Nazi party member Joseph Goebbels became Adolf Hitler's propaganda minister in 1933, which gave him power over all German radio, press, cinema, and theater. Cinema and theater are critical, and we're going to have some videos to show you some examples of how they do this when you're not aware. And the Nazis learned how to turn their peaceful citizens against segments of their population, like political dissidents and the Jews, again, using racism, hate, and propaganda as weapons. And that's why I always caution people every time you see somebody using, racism or on television to, use a message, be aware that they could be playing with you. If you tell a lie, this is a quote from the guy, from the Hitler's propaganda minister, Joseph Goebbels. If you tell a lie big enough and keep repeating it, people will eventually come to believe it. The lie can be maintained only for such time as the state can shield the people from the political, economic, and or military consequences of the lie, meaning that everything has a shelf life. You have to accomplish whatever you want to accomplish in that amount of time, because once the people realize what's going on, you're in trouble. It thus becomes vitally important for the state to use all of its power to repress dissent, for the truth is the mortal enemy of the lie, and thus by extension, the truth is the greatest enemy of the state. So they knew that, and that's very important. And as a historical fact, if you have time, research the classified Operation Paperclip, where a lot of the Nazi leadership was brought to the United States after the war. Some of these people raised families here and live long lives, and we learned a whole lot from them, but they learned all they knew about propaganda from the United States. Hitler's right relied on talent filmmakers like Eleni Riefenstahl to write the government's version of Nazi history. Her involvement in crafting Nazi government propaganda was eventually her undoing. I have a few quotes that are very interesting here that I want to read carefully because it puts things into perspective. This is from Adolf Hitler. "Terrorism is the best political weapon, for nothing drives people harder than a fear of a sudden death." It's very interesting. And here is one from Joseph Stalin, which is very obvious what they mean by that. "The easiest way to gain control of a population is to carry out acts of terror. The public will clamor for such laws if their personal security is threatened. So they use these techniques of coming up with their own terrorist attacks to sell war. And the Nazis perfected false flag operations, and how they fool the public to rally behind them for war. Last quote by Adolf Hitler: "By the skillful and sustained use of propaganda, one can make a people see even heaven as hell, or as an extremely wretched life as a paradise." So obviously these are very smart people that knew exactly what they were doing. At the end of the day, they failed, but they know that the mind is a very powerful weapon, so they knew how to manipulate people or trick them into what they wanted to do. Another quick facts here that I think people will be very interested in researching and verifying all this information. Believe it or not, the Nazis' murder of Jews, communists, and gypsies using gas chambers was actually an American idea. This is a short article from the San Francisco Chronicle from 2003. And it says, the concept of a white, blonde-haired, blue-eyed master Nordic race didn't originate with Hitler. The idea was created in the United States and cultivated in California, decades before Hitler came to power. California eugenicists play an important, although little-known role in the American eugenics movement campaign for ethnic cleansing. Eugenics was the pseudoscience aimed at improving the human race. In its extreme racist form, that meant wiping away all human beings deemed unfit, preserving only those who confronted to a Nordic stereotype. Elements of the philosophy were enshrined as a national policy by forced sterilization of women and segregation laws, as well as marriage restrictions enacted in 27 states. This is part of the story that I am learning about the United States that I didn't know 4 years ago. In 1909, California became the third state to adopt such laws. Ultimately, eugenics practitioners coercively sterilized some 60,000 Americans. And this is a problem that we also had in the Caribbean, which I didn't know until recently, that women were being sterilized without their knowledge in the Caribbean as part of the same effort. Before World War II, nearly half of coercive sterilizations were done in California, and even after the war, the state accounted for a third of all such surgeries. Interesting fact, in 1933, the American advertising industry proudly and publicly boasted that Hitler was copying their American propaganda techniques. Another interesting fact, Bush and the Rockefeller families, as well as many big banks, funded and supported the Nazi war machine. This is all extremely well documented in Untold History of the United States by Oliver Stone, as well as many other books. I honestly didn't believe much of these things until I took the time to actually go and verify the information. That's when it hit me. But that's why I encourage people, just go and look for yourself, because I can show you all these facts and all these things, but it's a door that you have to cross yourself. And again, even the San Francisco Chronicle is acknowledging that they themselves are learning about all these things, recently. Okay. Military PSYOP, military psychological operations. What is a PSYOP? A PSYOP are planned operations to convey selected information and indicators to audiences. Again, this is the key point here, to influence their emotions, motives, and objective reasoning. That's the whole purpose of propaganda. And ultimately, the behavior of governments, organizations, groups, and individuals. It's another fact that I found interesting early in my research. The controversy at CNN and NPR, where the military from the 4th Psychological Operations Group had their own people supposedly training with industry. It turns out that there was a big national uproar about it, and people demanded answers on why we had to have military psychological personnel that were supposed to be, fighting wars at CNN and NPR. And the programs were terminated, and if you want more information, you can go to Wikipedia and type psychological operations, and you can see it's a well-developed science. They have white and black PSYOPs. and it defines each color, what it means, and everything. That's what we have today. We have mainstream media, sophisticated, high-tech deception. It's a big psyop. I struggle every day with, it's difficult to accept that the people that you trust the most are doing this to you, and you will feel like this cannot be happening. This is an alternative reality, but it's only until you do this research that you will realize that all of this is true and it's still ongoing. We have a quote from William Colby, former director of the CIA. The CIA owns everyone of any significance in the major media. So if you believe that you don't like Fox News because Bill O'Reilly is this or that, or you don't watch Glenn Beck because this and that, and you prefer to go to Rachel Maddow, believe me, you're getting propaganda. It's on both sides, and that's the problem. The people take sides and go to the extremes. And what we are trying to tell people is that the truth sometimes lies somewhere in the middle. And I personally listen to everybody, and I read everything, but I do my own research, and that's when I realize that everybody's lying. The Pentagon analysts and the mainstream media. In 2008, the New York Times exposed how analysts portrayed in the U.S. news media as independent and objective were in fact under the tutelage of the Pentagon, from the New York Times. Hidden behind that appearance of objectivity, though, is a Pentagon information apparatus that has used those analysts in a campaign to generate favorable news coverage of the administration's wartime performance. Again, Wikipedia is a good source of information, but there are books that I recommend, and verify all of this, and read. It's the only way to find out what's going on. Operation Mockingbird is the classified. Again, something else that I didn't know just a few years ago. This is a short article from Wikipedia again. It was a secret campaign by the United States Central Intelligence Agency to influence the media. It began in the 1950s, and it was initially organized by this guy Mayer and Alan Dulles, and was later led by Frank Wisner after Dulles became the head of the CIA. The organization recruited leading American journalists into a network to help present the CIA's point of view, and funded some students and cultural organizations and magazines as front, and it's still going on today. Also, this is very important, people should verify this. Within the NDAA 2013 bill that President Obama signed, Congress approved, and sometimes they sign these laws without knowing what's in it, approves domestic deceptive propaganda. What this means is that it's not that now they're going to start lying to you. They've been doing that forever. Is that what I think it means is that if you want to go after organizations like CNN or MSNBC for lying to you, you don't have any legal recourse to go after them. It's like in your face. Everybody ready for a leaked sex video? We're going to show you a very interesting sample of how Hollywood plays into all this role of war propaganda. And when I saw this for the first time, I was pissed because I was expecting some nudity, and I didn't see anything. But it's very interesting, very interesting. Again, what they want to do with this is they want to raise your emotions. In this case, they want you to get aroused or whatever it is, and then feed you the message. We have another example here before the video. The movie, The American Sniper, that was released recently. This is an article from Global Research. It's a great website that if you want to learn about what's really going on, there's a lot of really good activists there. Globalresearch.ca, and the article is titled "American Sniper: Hollywood's Racist Propaganda Promoting Military Aggression Spawned Death Threats Against Arabs and Muslims." And following this release, the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee has warned of a significant rise in violent hate rhetoric targeting the Arab and Muslim American communities. So, you know, when they want you to hate somebody, that's how they do it. And when they want to sell you war, this is how they do it. I'm gonna show you the naked video real quick.
Cabo 2013!
Cabo!
Not a surprise for you.
Look what I found.
Oh, man. Babe, you look hot.
Thanks, babe. Look at you. So romantic.
Got your rose petals.
I see that. Wow.
What you got there?
It's on camera. I want to show you something.
Yeah, I want to show you something.
Okay. Let's see if I can figure out how to set this up here. I think that's it. Who cares?
Our nation is on the brink of yet another conflict in the Middle East, this time in Syria. The roots of the current upheaval in Syria lie in sectarian divisions, Sunnis versus Alawites. For decades, the nation has been ruled by the Assad family, first Hafez, and now his son, Bashar. Their government is made up primarily of members of Syria's Alawite religious minority. They ruled ruthlessly over the country's Sunni Muslim majority, using their extensive security and still existent Russian military support to maintain tight control. That is, until 2.5 years ago. A loose coalition of Sunni Islamist insurgents rose up against the Assad regime, creating pockets of resistance throughout the country and brought the battle to the nation's capital, Damascus. Most recently, reports came in that a chemical weapons attack by the Assad government killed nearly 1,400 Syrian civilians. This brutal action by the Syrian government on its own citizens crossed President Obama's red line. And now he has asked Congress for the ability to make tactical military strikes in Syria. The American people await their decision. Now, on to Egypt.
If you're not having no hair, all you do is take them a little bit more like that. And
Well, just wanna say that I don't know. To me, it's pretty obvious what they're trying to do. But kudos to Alyssa Milano for selling herself for propaganda. It's the first time you see it, and they do this kind of things just because they work. They have tried over and over again, and they know that they can convince. If they don't convince you in particular, they can convince a big chunk of the population. And they do this through video games. They do this through movies. They do this, and that's why it was so important for the Nazis to control cinema and theater. So they've been doing this forever, and to the casual observer that doesn't know exactly what's going on, you go there and you expect to see something, and while you are trying to see something, they're feeding you these messages, and then you go talk to your neighbor. Oh yeah, we have to do this because I know what's going on in Syria. I know that the government over there is so evil, and they kill their own people. So something that would never happen here in America. Sorry, I'm being a little sarcastic, but we're going to show you examples that it does and can happen here in America. But in this case, the propaganda works. They've been doing this for a long time. And again, if you decide that you want to research all this stuff, let me tell you, the current media lies and deceptions are far more entertaining than any show you can find on television, no matter which one it is, including House of Cards. And I watched House of Cards, and I can see what they're doing, but this is far more interesting. It's very also troubling, and also it can be also very depressing sometimes, but it's very interesting. Okay, let's talk a little bit about real conspiracies. People hear this term conspiracy theories. Well, it seems like everything is a conspiracy theory these days. What is real and what is not real? We're going to talk we're going to show a quick video for some examples, but We're going to talk about Operation Northwoods. This is a plan that is declassified. You can find more information on Wikipedia. You can read books. There are documentaries out there. Again, it was declassified in 2000. Most Americans don't know about this, but if you download the original, not the summary, you download the original that looks like that, and you read some of the stuff that the Joint Chief of Staff were planning to do back then. This was a plan in the 1963. To summarize real quick, it was a plan to commit acts of terrorism here in the United States to then blaming it on Fidel Castro to start a war. And I believe the document was declassified by accident, because now everybody's starting to find out, these kind of things that we didn't know. And this General Leminster, who came up with the plan, he was later promoted to I believe it was head of NATO or some big position in Europe where they carry out other events like this, like Operation Gladio, Gladio A and B. If you go to the CIA's own website, the public website, and you type Operation Gladio, you will see some of the information right there of what they did in Europe. And there are many other documents that you can research, Operation Ajax. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that this is nothing new, but I'm going to read to you some of the stuff that they were planning, and there were many other scenarios that they were discussing. We could blow up a U.S. ship in Guantanamo Bay and blame Cuba. We could develop a communist Cuban terror campaign in Miami, Florida cities, and even Washington. Casualty lists in U.S. newspapers would cause a helpful wave of indignation. The terror campaign could be pointed at Cuban refugees seeking haven in the U.S. We could sink a boatload of Cubans en route to Florida, real or simulated. It is possible to create an incident which will demonstrate convincingly that a Cuban aircraft has attacked and shot down a chartered civil airliner en route from the United States to Jamaica, Guatemala, or Venezuela. They had plans to crash airplanes by remote control. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. If you read at least pages 8, 9, and 10, you will see what we're talking about. But you have to read it for yourself, because it doesn't have the same impact. You need to download it and read it. The mere fact that they came up with this plan is an act of treason, and nobody ever lost their heads or their jobs over this. In many cases, in many other cases, like in 9/11, Pearl Harbor, Gulf of Tonkin, many other incidents, some of the people that are involved in this kind of situations, they get promoted. So if we're talking about the incompetence theory, how come that in all these situations, incompetence is promoted? We should investigate them and hold them accountable. So we're going to show this real quick video here on real conspiracies. And this is from Russian television. And I have to say, a lot of people are moving to Russian television just because there is another view or angle of what's really going on. And again, you have to consider the possibility that everybody's having an agenda, but the truth is somewhere in the middle. And they are funding Americans to run these programs. So I think this is very important. So with this, we're going to move real quick to the next video.
The Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines a conspiracy as a secret plan made by two or more people to do something that is harmful or illegal. Now, usually when the topic of conspiracy theories is broached, there's a few eye rolls. But it's an undeniable fact that conspiracies are real. And no, I'm not talking about the unfounded claims that reptilian shapeshifters are projecting Illuminati symbolism into our brains. I'm talking about real historical events that have been proven to be government conspiracies. Yes, believe it or not, this government has conspired against its own people on more than one occasion. So to go over just a few of the most shocking declassified government conspiracies, I'm joined by BTS producer Manuel Rapolo. What's going on? What is up, man?
Wait,
so,
I'm confused. We're not talking about reptilian Illuminati shapeshifters?
Man, did I give you the wrong
Yeah,
talking points?
I brought my costume. I thought we were going to do it.
Put on the lizard head.
All right.
No, we're going to be talking about real conspiracies that have been declassified. There are so many to count, Manny. I know that we only picked out kind of the 5 craziest ones. Let's start with my favorite, Operation Northwoods.
Start with the craziest. Why not?
It was a plan presented from Robert McNamara, the Joint Chiefs of Staff under President Kennedy. Obviously, we know at that time we were really irking for a reason to get into Cuba. So what was this all about?
Sure. So that's dead on, dead on. Well, the United States was really keen on going to war with Cuba. They needed the public support to do this. And really this, as far as conspiracy theories that have later on been revealed through declassified information, is really one of the scariest because it details what the United States is capable of just coming up with in terms of ideas. They needed the public support for a war with Cuba. This, of course, never happened, thank God, because of what they were doing was, what they were planning to do was really, really scary. They were talking about staged bombings in Cuba, fake landings by Cuban troops.
They were Florida, on U.S. soil.
Exactly. They were planning to blow up an American ship. There was plans to hijack and crash an airliner. So
that sounds familiar,
right? But I mean, this is all thanks to declassified information that we found out thanks to none other than Oliver Stone of all people, who through his film JFK, kind of regalvanized that idea that we need to get the truth out about the JFK assassination conspiracy. 1997 comes around, 30 years after the assassination, and you've got thousands and thousands of declassified documents titled Operations Northwoods. What is that? And come to find out that this was this huge conspiracy that was never carried out.
A false flag attack that never happened.
Right.
But the scariest part about this is that false flags are real and that this almost happened. I mean, it was presented all the way up in the chain of command up to the president.
Yeah, I mean,
thankfully Kennedy rejected it, but
I mean, false flags. We talk about these; they're so often dismissed as conspiracy theories. You can choose to buy into some or not, more recent ones, but you can look back in the historical thread. Remember the main
this own government,
right? The Spanish-American War, the Mexican-American War. These were all started by false flag attacks.
Right, exactly. So it's not too crazy to talk about false flags as historical fact. MK Ultra. This is something kind of searching for the perfect truth serum here, thinking that was a possibility, and they just loved to dose people with acid, didn't they?
MK Ultra is one of the craziest ones. In fact, I've heard references to whether I don't know if the '60s counterculture influenced like MK Ultra or vis-a-vis, but they were experimenting with all kinds of psychotropic drugs, LSD, barbiturates as well. They were finding prostitutes, prisoners, the mentally ill, and they were experimenting with all kinds of crazy drugs on people. And I mean, you don't find out about this until much later on when it's found out that it was actually the CIA that was involved in doing this.
Right, and now the CIA has, I think, half of the world's acid supply, or LSD, I think, at least in this country. And it actually did spawn into the 60s, because it's funny to see that this actually started in the 50s. So you just picture FBI agents from the 50s dosing each other. I mean, it turned into this whole thing.
And if you've seen the movie The Men Who Stare at Goats, that's actually a pretty good example of that's kind of a film adaptation of what more or less.
And there was a subsect of MK Ultra where it's called Operation Midnight Climax, where they're actually drugging kind of your average Joes and putting them in rooms with prostitutes and doing just crazy stuff behind two-way mirrors and really twisted stuff there.
Right, and it goes back to what you were saying, trying to develop that perfect truth serum.
I wonder if they got that through watching prostitutes. Let's talk about the craziest one, prohibition alcohol poisoning.
I hadn't even heard about. No, I'd heard about prohibition. I didn't know what was going on. So prohibition going on in the 1920s, thanks to the 18th Amendment, of course, banning the wholesale of alcohol in the United States. I had no idea until I started researching what the FBI was doing under directions of the U.S. Department of Treasury, which was to poison alcohol. And there was actually the New York City Medical Examiner at the time in 1926, Charles Norris. I wonder if they called him Chuck Norris. Never mind. Charles Norris actually said practically all the liquor that is sold in New York today is toxic. So it was known, even at the time, that the FBI, the government, was actually poisoning people Look, prohibition was absolutely unenforceable at the time. So the fact that
why don't we just kill them?
Yeah, exactly.
We're just gonna kill them.
We're just gonna kill them. No, it's crazy. The stuff that they were putting in here was methane, formaldehyde, ammonia, arsenic, kerosene, acetone. That's paint thinner.
Unbelievable. Let's move on to Tuskegee, the experiment on poor black citizens of the United States.
Oh, they were calling them simpletons at the time. They were picking out uneducated, poor black citizens at the time.
And it was basically infecting them with syphilis.
Yeah, that's exactly what they were doing. This was going on between 1932 and 1972. They infected upwards of 400 individuals, many of them women. 28 people died directly from the disease. Several children were born with the disease. Of course, and it was horrible what they were doing to them. They were telling these people that, you know, we're looking into this mysterious new disease. Many of them didn't even know what was going on. They were told that they were being administered an antidote, but really they were just given aspirin. And they were conducting all sorts of experiments to find out how syphilis affects the black population. Really, really awful things. And even and keep in mind, this kept going well into the 70s, 1972, until it was discontinued. And it wasn't until 1997, under President Clinton, he was the first American president.
You know what? Let's stop actually administering syphilis to black populations.
You know what?
Let's just not do that. Let's not do that.
Yeah.
And we're sorry.
Yeah, that's pretty terrible.
And of course, Operation Mockingbird. You know, this was a program that the CIA, FBI was inserting operatives within all the major media networks. I mean, we're talking about all of them, papers, publications. And the thing that my whole question is this still going on today? Because they've really permeated throughout the culture of the establishment media. And really, we see the establishment media today, they just parrot the establishment. I'm like, wait, has this gone full circle? Or did you guys do a really good job setting the, the foundation here?
It's absolutely right, because, I mean, this is Cold War mentality. And as we know, Cold War mentality is permeated well into today. But what they were doing, they were bribing heads of major publications and mainstream, even for the time during the Cold War, the New York Times, Associated Press, Reuters, they were really getting through to this. And you ask, is this still going on today? Well, we can look at the last National Defense Authorization Act, NDAA 2013, has a provision in there that legalizes propaganda. We found out last year that Central Command was giving these what are they?
Sock puppet
accounts, up to 10 accounts per serviceman to kind of promote this pro-America propaganda in foreign
propaganda
countries.
Online.
Exactly. And I mean, do we really even need that? We have, like you said, we have the corporate media.
We have trolls. We already have trolls.
We have media. Exactly.
And we
do
have
we
the
really
corporate
need
media.
this?
No, it shows you how.
Got it here. Short in the interest of time. It's a little longer. It's almost done. But again, if you want to research the Tuskegee experiments on Wikipedia, and there are books written about it. If you want to research the poisoning of alcohol, which again I didn't know about, all of this information is out there. All you have to do is take some of your time and go do the research yourself, and find out that it's not they're not lies. They're real factual historical events that happen, and it's like we are learning. We thought we knew about our own history, and a lot had been not necessarily suppressed. It's just that the attention has been shifted, and a lot of facts that history books present are politically correct. So that's how they've been able to get away with a lot of this stuff so far. But the internet came, and the internet changed a lot of this. Now people can go quickly verify in 5 seconds if somebody's lying to them or not. I want to talk a little bit about the conspiracy theories, because I think that, I don't think, it's more than obvious that there is a war being waged now on the truth. And people, the first thing that when you talk to somebody who is unaware of these historical facts, the first thing they call you is a conspiracy theorist. Because all the way over there, these evil dictators will kill their own people and do these awful things, but that will never happen here. And it's difficult. It's difficult to explain to people sometimes when they have that mindset that evil is everywhere. I mean, people are people. People lie everywhere. There are real conspiracies everywhere, and we need to be open to the possibility that they could be here. And again, but where does the term conspiracy theory comes from? It's an old term, but it turns out that the CIA, there was an interagency memo, the CIA memo 1035-960 during the JFK assassination and the Warren Commission. This was a document that was classified, like always all this information is classified until somebody requests the document and see what was going on. But it was classified due to a Freedom of Information Act request by the New York Times, and I provide the link here so that you can read it by yourself. It's about 2 or 3 pages long, and the memo described, it was a memo that was flown, they sent it down to all the government agencies, and the purpose was to instruct government agencies how to deal with quote-unquote conspiratorial arguments. And when you read the document, you read the original, you realize that the purpose wasn't to look at the facts or research what was really going on. It was about attacking the credibility of anybody who asked questions about what happened. You realize that they were using propaganda, and they were attacking the credibility of those who asked the questions again. And it's very interesting because you see that it's a clear conspiracy to manipulate public opinion. After that, the term started being used as a pejorative. Essentially, if you believe in conspiracy theories, you are, a little bit crazy, and that's, something that will never happen here. So why I mention this? I think that it's very important because you can see the trend is not just here in the United States. It's in the United Kingdom, and it's also in France. In France in particular, they're talking about criminalizing, talking about conspiracy theories. Why are they so worried about? If you think about it, there is a whole lot of people out there that have all sorts of beliefs. Some of them are like, extravagant, super crazy, but they are worried, and they are really worried, and that's what I want to point out. What are they afraid of? If in the case of David Cameron, he was recently at the United Nations, and he gave a speech on that a lot of people immediately catch it. He was saying, I'm going to read it, that nonviolent, and this is very important, nonviolent extremism is just as dangerous as terrorism and must be eradicated using all means at the government disposal. He references 9/11 and 7/7 truthers, or people that believe that the government or was involved in those events, as examples of the type of extremism that must be dealt with in a fashion similar to ISIS. So essentially, if you are a conspiracy theorist and you believe crazy things, and you believe that the government has something to do with 7/7 in the case of England or 9/11 in the case of here, that you are a potential terrorist and you're going to be put in a category as ISIS or Al Qaeda. So why that rhetoric? Why does it need to be so? Why are they so worried about nonviolent extremism? And this is a typical ad hominem attack when you start talking to people. And the way I read it in my own experience is, because I've seen it often from people from the left, is if you're a conspiracy theorist, you're a right wing, and what this means is, in my opinion, silly and racist. You believe silly things, and of course, you're a right wing, you're racist. And that's the same plan of attack that they're taking in France. They call it right wingers over there. In Britain, in England, they do the same thing. And that's very interesting. They have the same plan of attack to deal with the people that ask questions about whether government or government officials are corrupt or have been having, for example, even if you don't believe that 9/11 was an inside job, but let's say that you believe that Dick Cheney and Bush had advanced knowledge. It's still the same thing, as we're going to see in this short video. When you study the subject of false flags, and you can look up the definition of what a false flag is, or watch our other presentations on the subject, you'll realize that false flags come in two flavors. Either let it happen or make it happen. It's still a criminal act. So whether you ask questions or not, you're going to be put in that category. So with this, we're going to show a short video of a racial medal, just to show you how sophisticated all these attacks on people that ask questions about all these events are. And for people that trust her, which I used to listen to Rachel Maddow all the time, that's my background. And I felt betrayed when I found out all these things that she's doing. We're going to have some more information about her in other later slides. But I want to point out that in the case of 9/11, for people that are not aware of what's going on, the 9/11 commissioners, or the people who ran the investigation, they themselves don't believe in their own investigation. And there is plenty of YouTube videos where they are online saying our investigation was compromised. We were getting false statements from everybody, including the intelligence services. It wasn't a criminal investigation. They didn't have subpoena powers. So there is a whole lot that we need to find out. Regardless of what you believe happened that day, even if it was just clear incompetence, people still need to be prosecuted, and many of them got promoted. And this is a movement that was initiated by the families of the people that, the families that lost relatives that day in 9/11. So with this, we're going to show you this this video of Rachel Maddow, and in there you will hear her saying, "Conspiracy theories always justify their violence. My question is, really, can you name one single instance?"
There are very few people in the corporate media that I actually enjoy watching, and more than just for entertainment. Well, Rachel Maddow is one of those people. She's a seasoned anchor at MSNBC who has a powerful presentation and has made some epic rants. However, she also wouldn't be where she is if she didn't serve a particular role for the establishment. And as critical as she may be of Obama from time to time, at the end of the day, she's there to promote the Democratic Party, which she does quite well by not only conducting softball interviews with prominent politicians, but by fear-mongering her audience constantly about the GOP. Now, I'm not saying that the Republican Party doesn't deserve ridicule. What I am saying is that both parties are equally complicit in the disastrous policies that are destroying this country. But recently, Maddow has gone beyond her usual partisan politics and is connecting obscure dots to make some pretty startling conclusions in the wake of the Boston bombings.
The headline, and I think also in some ways the bottom line, of the Boston Marathon bombing has been that the reason for the bombing was radical Islam, that the bombers were inspired by the online Al-Qaeda magazines. They committed the bombing for the same cockamamie conspiratorial nonsense that we've all had to become so familiar with. But if this new reporting from the BBC and the Wall Street Journal is correct, that may not have been the only conspiratorial nonsense radicalism that was at work here. I mean, really, pick your poison, right? I mean, it's the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, which Tamerlan Tsarnaev also apparently had a nice copy of. It's the Protocols of Zion, or it's 9/11 Truth, or it's what Anwar al-Awlaki sold to Nidal Malik Hassan. There's always been an appeal to this necrotizing conspiracy theory radicalism, which almost always butts up against justifying violence, justifying...
Wow. So according to Maddow, conspiracy theories are almost always used as justification for violence. And the Tsarnaev brothers were not radicalized by Islam alone, but were also by conspiracy theories, namely those regarding 9/11. Of course, she forgets to mention that Dzhokhar himself allegedly said that U.S. foreign policy was the motivating factor behind the attacks, but I digress. Then Maddow compares Anwar al-Awlaki's teachings to people who aren't satisfied with the official 9/11 story. Think about how dangerous that rhetoric is for 1 second. What does it say about the 9/11 victims' family members who are unfulfilled with the investigation? What about the countless millions of people around the world who are unsatisfied with what the government told us happened and why? Or how about the groups of firefighters, architects, scientists, and world leaders who have also expressed their doubts? Should they all be flagged as potential terrorist threats too? But look, this isn't the first time Rachel has acted as an echo chamber for the government's position on 9/11. She once dedicated a whole segment on her show just to promote it.
Two of the best things ever published about the 9/11 attacks are these two books. I think that was a really admirable approach to try to make widely accessible the findings of the 9/11 report. But The even better thing they did is that they published an official comic book of the same report. It's the official graphic novel, a graphic adaptation of the real 9/11 Commission report.
Awesome. Thanks for recommending the Commission report and its dumbed-down comic book version. Nothing like a cartoon to help digest the propaganda a little bit easier. But Maddow's not just selling propaganda. She's also character assassinating anyone who feels like we haven't been given the truth.
This was written specifically to take on the claims of the people who said that 9/11 didn't really happen, or that 9/11 was an inside job, that 9/11 was not actually an attack on our country, but was rather a hoax perpetrated by our government in order to enslave us or something. It didn't work. The 9/11 conspiracies have stood up to the facts disproving them. The 9/11 conspiracies have not gone away because they are too ideologically and, I think, emotionally satisfying to the people who espouse them.
Yeah, Rachel, because someone who wants the truth about why things are the way they are must believe that 9/11 either never happened or that it was a hoax or that the government completely engineered every facet in order to enslave humanity. Because apparently it's too hard to believe that this government would not care about the lives of human beings in order to advance geopolitical goals. Is it really too hard to believe the fact that Bush and his cabinet turned a blind eye to let the attacks happen or even ensure that they happened? According to Maddow, it's somehow more comforting for people to accept the view that the government would allow them to die to justify war. But wait a minute, is that exactly what she thinks?
That is why the new bombshell reporting by Kurt Eichenwald, which ran as an op-ed in today's New York Times, but is also in his new book, is so important. Mr. Eichenwald, in reporting for this new book, says it was not just that famous bin Laden determined to strike in the U.S. presidential daily briefing that the Bush administration received and ignored less than a month before 9/11, just over a month before 9/11. It was a whole series of presidential daily briefs, all through May and June and July of 2001, all warning of a planned major strike by al-Qaeda in the United States, which then, of course, ultimately happened in September of that year. There's a responsibility to get history right for its own sake, right?
Yes, Rachel, it is. And letting 9/11 happen is making it happen. And I commend you for being critical of war, critical of many of the empire's destructive policies. But until you start asking questions about what drives these policies, you're doing nothing more than perpetuating them.
Yeah, it's a very telling video. Again, notice that when you read CIA, the classified 1035-960 interagency memo, and that's one of the main weapons that they use is ridiculing people and character assassinating anybody who asks questions about what happened. But the interesting fact is that Rachel Maddow herself, she's a conspiracy theorist, and she doesn't realize she is, because letting it happen, if that's what she believes, and it sounds like that's what she believes, is making it happen. And that's the two flavors of false flag operations. And if that's the case, and that's why I put the label CIA Mockingbird asset, because if she believes that there is the Bush and Cheney and Condoleezza Rice, or all the cabinet had advanced knowledge that 9/11 was going to happen, how come that we're still not talking about it? How come that we're talking about something else? And that would be a big deal. It would be a national scandal, and they should be tried for treason, and it's a criminal act. Even if you believe in the incompetence theory, they still need to be prosecuted for. I'm sure at some point we'll find plenty of people that can be charged with criminal negligence, but we didn't do that, and we are still here today talking about what happened that day, and a lot of the people that were involved, from military and civilian personnel, again got promoted. That's very strange, and if we don't investigate this incompetence, we'll still be here today and tomorrow. So it's an important issue. So let's stop the ad hominem attacks and go after the people who are doing these war policies. since we're talking about 9/11, I thought that it was appropriate to just mention a few brief facts about what happened that day that the public is not aware of, and regardless of what you believe happened that day, whether you believe that Bush and Cheney let it happen, or they were incompetent, or it was an inside job, whatever you think. Here are some facts. This is a fascinating subject. It's very, very extensive. You will spend many, many days and months researching all this stuff, and it's excellent. I mean, it's fascinating stuff. But a lot of people are not aware of the destruction of World Trade Center Building 7 that wasn't hit by an airplane, and it collapsed at free fall speed on its own footprint. And that free fall is it means something falling with acceleration of gravity, and the only way that a building can accelerate as it collapses by placing explosives. Because if you have ever played with Legos or cinder blocks, you see that you can push down and crack a few blocks, but there will be a delay, and that delay will accumulate through the collapse of the building. And this building collapsed at free fall, perfectly symmetric. Buildings that have collapsed historically, they tend to not fall at free fall speed at all. They tend to tip over, and in the case of earthquakes, they tend to tip over, and they retain a lot of the structure. And a lot of buildings have been hit by airplanes. If you do a quick search online, you will see that this is not the first time. But this building wasn't impacted by an airplane. The fires were minimum, and it collapsed at free fall speed in a perfectly symmetrical fashion, which is very interesting. Also, I think that this is one of the best documentaries on the subject. We're not going to show it here, but it's called Anatomy of a Great Deception, 2014, by David Hooper. It's only an hour and 30 minutes, and it goes to the point. It's a very, very interesting piece of information, and it's the story of a guy who almost destroyed his family researching all this stuff, and he decided to make a documentary out of it. I want to point out that according to surveys, 30 to 40 million Americans just in the United States believe that the government is behind what happened, and that includes high-profile Democrats, military leaders, congressmen, intelligence professionals. And if you're curious about their names, we have another presentation on that subject that I'm going to list at the end of the presentation. It's called 9/11 Aftermath and Current, how it relates to current geopolitical events. And we talk in more detail about some of these bullet points. But I want to point out that Rudy Giuliani, the firefighters, and the BBC all had advanced knowledge of Building 7. And apparently no one can explain technically what happened to that building. Explosions were recorded, and there were multiple witnesses that heard explosion, and the NIST, the organization that was tasked with investigating this, refused to look for explosives. And they asked them, did you look for explosives as it is required by law, by code? And they said, no, we didn't feel it was necessary. But again, the World Trade Center was bombed in 1993, so it would make sense to go look for explosives. But to this day, they still haven't. It turns out that interesting people that are 9/11 investigators, the public and members of the academic organization, have taken samples of the World Trade Center dust, and they have taken that to analysis, to lab, and it turns out that there was an advanced form of thermite found called nanothermite, and that I haven't done that, but a lot of people apparently can take a sample and go test it if you have the funding and the time. There is a document, a scientific paper that is still on challenge from 2007, I believe, on this finding on the nanothermite. Another interesting fact is that the computer simulation that NIST used to explain the collapse of Building 7 is classified. Why it needs to be classified? It was, a building, the Salomon Brothers building. Why does it need to be classified? Why they didn't make the computer model public so that people can go and see what kind of assumptions were taken in order to, create a simulation of the Building 7 collapse, because they claim it was a single column that failed. and still the simulation doesn't match what you see on the video. So it's, it's very, very interesting. Anyways, let's move forward to the next slide. Here we're going to switch gears here and talk a little bit about the role of racism in the military and how they play with your emotions and how they get you to to approve war, in other words. And there are a few examples that I want to point out, and please bear with me a second. The issue of racism is very touchy. People tend to get really upset and really angry, and that's what I ask people not to do. And I know it's difficult, but I say calm down and just look at it from an objective perspective, and let's try to add up and see if we can see a picture from all of this. So we have here, I pointed out, I'm being a little critical of the left because I used to be with the left. We have a picture of President Obama crying the day the Sandy Hook shooting happened. National tragedy, no question about it. I personally never saw a real tear in high definition video, but let's assume that it was real, that he was genuinely crying about that incident. There was a school in Yemen that was targeted by a drone, and lots of innocent kids died. Who cried that day? Was the American public aware of that particular shooting and or that destruction of that school? Did anybody cry here? I mean, when all these national incidents are put in front of us, we all tend to get angry and upset, and I mean, with good reasons when somebody gets shot. But again, this is what we are doing overseas, and there are kids just like any kid here in America, and the military is starting to realize how they're being manipulated with the issue of racism. And I wrote here, there is simply no highest form of bigotry and racism than justifying murder for political reasons. A lot of people, come to me and tell me, oh, well, the president has to do this, has to do that to stay in the political game. These are people, and if you wouldn't do that in Ferguson, Missouri, or in Baltimore, don't do it overseas. These are, human beings. So down here I wrote that, in my opinion, I think by definition, drone strikes are racist because the reason you send a drone is to not put American lives in danger. So it's easier to just send a missile, a Hellfire missile from a drone and wipe out an entire neighborhood. And it's been proven that 10 civilians die for every militant killed. So these things are not accurate. So we care about American lives, not putting our soldiers in danger and all of that at the expense of the foreign public. To me, that's clearly racist. But it's very. Those are the kind of things that I find upsetting. And when I point it out, people tend to just get upset too because they want to defend what the president is doing, what the left is doing in general. But if you connect all the dots and see what's happening, you can look past all these issues and see what they are really trying to do is play with your emotions. I'm going to show here a short video that from military activists on what the issue of how the military see the issue of racism.
And I tried hard to be proud of my service, but all I could feel was shame. And racism could no longer mask the reality of the occupation. These were people, these were human beings. I've since been plagued by guilt anytime I see an elderly man, like the one who couldn't walk, who we rolled onto a stretcher and told the Iraqi police to take him away. I feel guilt anytime I see a mother with her children, like the one who cried hysterically and screamed that we are worse than Saddam as we forced her from her home. I feel guilt anytime I see a young girl, like the one I grabbed by the arm and dragged into the street. We were told we were fighting terrorists. The real terrorist was me, and the real terrorism is this occupation. Racism within the military has long been an important tool to justify the destruction and occupation of another country. It has long been used to justify the killing, subjugation, and torture of another people. Racism is a vital weapon employed by this government. It is a more important weapon than a rifle, a tank, a bomber, or a battleship. It is more destructive than an artillery shell, or a bunker buster, or a Tomahawk missile. While those weapons are created and owned by this government, they are harmless without people willing to use them. Those who send us to war do not have to pull a trigger or lob a mortar round. They do not have to fight the war, they merely have to sell the war. They need a public who is willing to send their soldiers into harm's way. They need soldiers who are willing to kill and be killed without question. They can spend millions on a single bomb, but that bomb only becomes a weapon when the ranks of the military are willing to follow orders to use it. They can send every last soldier anywhere on earth, but there will only be a war if soldiers are willing to fight. And the ruling class, the billionaires who profit from human suffering, care only about expanding their wealth, controlling the world economy. Understand that their power lies only in their ability to convince us that war, oppression, and exploitation is in our interest. They understand that their wealth is dependent on their ability to convince the working class to die to control the market of another country. And convincing us to kill and die is based on their ability to make us think that we are somehow superior. Soldiers, sailors, Marines, airmen have nothing to gain from this occupation. The vast majority of people living in the U.S. have nothing to gain from this occupation. In fact, not only do we have nothing to gain, but we suffer more because of it. We lose limbs, endure trauma, and give our lives. Our families have to watch flag-draped coffins lowered into the earth. Millions in this country without health care, jobs, or access to education must watch this government squander over $450 million a day on this occupation. Poor and working people in this country are sent to kill poor and working people in another country to make the rich richer. And without racism, soldiers would realize that they have more in common with the Iraqi people than they do with the billionaires who send us to war. I threw families onto the street in Iraq, only to come home and find families thrown onto the street in this country, in this tragic and unnecessary foreclosure crisis. We need to wake up and realize that our real enemies are not in some distant land. They're not people whose names we don't know and cultures we don't understand. The enemy is people we know very well and people we can identify. The enemy is a system that wages war when it's profitable. The enemy is the CEOs who lay us off from our jobs when it's profitable. It's the insurance companies who deny us health care when it's profitable. It's the banks who take away our homes when it's profitable. Our enemy is not 5,000 miles away. They are right here at home. If we organize and fight with our sisters and brothers, we can stop this war, we can stop this government, and we can create a better world.
Well, that was back during the Gulf War. Now we're back to the Middle East with more war. And, we were promised that the wars would come to an end, and the Iraq war was a mistake, and we were going to bring the troops home. And again, none of that happened. In fact, we're going back to the Middle East again. So, but we have to look past all these emotional weapons of mass destruction, if you will, and look at what the government is really trying to accomplish. And they have a plan, and the plan is very clear. If you do your own research, you will find out and connect all the dots. It's a big puzzle. It requires a lot of your time, but none of the things happen by accident. And over here we have, in this slide, we have, I'm not going to show this video in the interest of time, but we have a leaked conversation between Barack Obama and Dmitry Medvedev, the Prime Minister of Russia, back in 2008, where Obama promised that after his re-election, he would have the flexibility to deal with the missile defense issue, because the Russians were, they're really concerned about why are we placing all these weapons so close to them, and the excuse was to deal with Iran, which doesn't have a nuclear weapon and doesn't have the capabilities that the Russians have. So, Obama, pledged for some flexibility, and after his re-election, he did a 180-degree turn and started demonizing the Russians, He imposed sanctions, started to surround them with ships, nuclear bombers, more missiles, and advisors on the ground in Ukraine, and funding support for open neo-Nazis in Ukraine. There is a lot of funding and weapons going over there, and if you believe that Obama has nothing to do with it, at least it's more than obvious that he's selling, all this stuff. He's selling the propaganda, so he's part of them. It's hard to picture, but it's obviously the reality of what's going on. Even if he's not pressing any buttons or cutting any deals, he's still there as a salesperson to sell what's going on. They're accusing the Russians of the downing of the MH17 airplane. German intelligence cleared the Russians from any wrongdoing, and you bet the Russians are mad at him. The Russians were very excited when Obama was elected. He had a 70% approval rating, and they probably were thinking, well, we're not dealing with a white-skinned typical neocon, so we have somebody different. And it turns out that now they don't like him with good reasons, because that we're blaming them for things that they haven't done, and the administration hasn't really provided any evidence of Russian aggression or invasion. They blamed the Crimea invasion. They said that the Russians invaded Crimea, but in reality, if you do your own research, you will find out that they had elections and people voted and they became part of Russia. And they've been Russians forever. Crimea was part of Russia before the United States was a country. And it turns out now that Vladimir Putin Obama called him isolated Russia, but according to surveys by Reuters and Time magazine, Putin now is more popular than Barack Obama. So that tells you, how low the guy has fallen in credibility. And I like to criticize the left from time to time, because they like to portray themselves as being the political party of peace, but they've never been the party of peace. The House of Representatives voted 348 to 48 to arm Ukraine. So that tells you that it's a wide bipartisan support for selling guns and selling war and hate. So don't believe the propaganda. Just in your own time, go and research all this stuff, and you will see that everybody's lying to you, pretty much. And here, again, that's what I used to be. I used to be a Democrat, so I tend to get, a little bit upset when I see people that don't necessarily understand what's going on, and you try carefully to bring some key details to their attention, and say, hey, look, it's both sides are doing this, and not just a problem with the right, And I remember back then, during the first and second Iraq invasion, Democrats were saying, oh, Bush sent us into wars we didn't need, based on lies and oil, and threw the country into a ditch. And we cannot police the world and protect everyone from evil dictators. And Republicans, which is the typical line of attack of the Democrats, is they're a bunch of racist warmongers. Here we have a picture, just to point out, about the oil thirsty Republican, a picture of Joe Biden's son. Apparently, this is from ABC News, by the way, very credible organization. Biden's son gets Ukrainian oil company gig. So the Democrats don't like to advertise what's going on, but it is about money and power. Is, I guess, what the summary of what I'm trying to say is. So now the liberal Democrats are saying we're conducting humanitarian missions only in geostrategic, energy-rich places, but only to help civilians. It's only to help people, and not oil wars of aggressions like the Republicans. Obama has no choice but to do the right thing and fight ISIS. The Republicans left a big mess behind. I remember the Republicans saying that, well, the world is better without Saddam Hussein. This is what the Republicans were saying. Now the Democrats are saying the world is better without Gaddafi and Assad needs to go. Interesting. And Putin wants World War III and he invaded Crimea. Obama is not in charge of the humanitarian messes left behind in Libya, Syria, Yemen, or the funding of neo-Nazis, which is an open fact, in Ukraine, because he's black. And, but he got Bin Laden. It's interesting to see all these, when Bin Laden was killed, I remember hearing everybody say, "Oh, Obama got him, he got him," you know, and the other president in 10 years couldn't do it. It was the same security apparatus, the same soldiers, the same CIA, same military who apparently got Bin Laden. He moved quickly to take credit for that, but what about all those birthday parties and wedding parties that have been, bombed? You know, is he taking credit for that? That's the question that I typically ask the Democrats. Here are some facts before we move on about the recent scandal with the Clinton Foundation. The top donor to the Clinton Foundation, this is from the Wall Street Journal, with $10 million is an Ukraine oligarch. So there you have it. You know, they take money from everybody. So this is not an issue of only those evil, racist Republicans. It's a question of both parties being racist and evil. And also we have the big scandal of in New York City, there are Haitians protesting in front of the Clinton Foundation about the missing money because they were collecting money after the earthquake, and that money is nowhere to be found. And I write, well, no wonder she had to raise the email server with all the emails and the evidence of what they did there, and in the case of also of Benghazi, of what happened there. So again, it's an issue that goes, for both political parties. And I just want to point out also that all of a sudden Obama is backing Libya intervention, Syria, Yemen, funding of neo-Nazis in Ukraine, and all of that, and then all of a sudden he's for peace in Iran. Doesn't make any sense unless you do all this research. In this next slide, we're going to talk a little bit about points of view of other people regarding the left and how different it is to the right. I'm going to show a video of Gerald Celente. He's a trends researcher. He's a political atheist. He doesn't support any political party. He criticizes both sides, and it's interesting to see. He's very good at picking up how the mainstream media and the newspapers and everybody word things to get you outraged when they need you outraged, or calm you down and give you helplessness, if you will. So he's really good. He tends to get a little bit angry sometimes, and we're going to see that. And he's going to hit really hard at the Democrats. And then we're going to show Oliver Stone, who is he's a historian himself, and he wrote the book Untold History of the United States because he was learning that what he was told regarding history of the United States, there were many key details that were omitted and in his own research early on, and that the history of the United States is not necessarily what we've been told when you look at the whole picture. So we're going to look at that. And Gerald Celente, going back to Gerald Celente, he was known for predicting the 1987 stock market crash. He has really good credentials and the 2008 financial crash. So here's a guy who knows a little bit about geopolitics, economics, trends. I mean, he's very knowledgeable of a lot of whistleblowers. Knowledgeable of a lot of different subjects. And I want to point out also that this is very important, that I think that my experience is that people, when you talk to people tend to tell you, oh, I don't need to read that, I don't need to read that book or watch that documentary. I know that what you're talking about is BS, and that's the problem. If we don't listen to each other, if we don't inform ourselves, we will never know if the people that we trust for news are telling us the truth. So with this, we're going to move forward to the video real quick.
Celebrating 30 years of phenomenal trend forecasting. 5 times a week, Monday through Friday. Here's Gerald Celente with today's trends in the news.
Hi, this is Gerald Celente, Friday, November 14th, 2014. And here are some of today's trends in the news. Well, the markets over there in Asia are like this, and in Europe, they're like that. And the good news in Europe is CNBC, Eurozone GDP beats. Greece emerges from recession. Investors breathed a sigh of relief on Friday as the Eurozone's economy grew more than expected in the third quarter. Eurozone GDP grew by 0.2% on the previous quarter, beating Reuters' forecast of a 0.1 expansion. How's that for nothing? I don't know, 0 points are really great. And here's the good news. France and Greece, things are really looking up over there. French GDP is up by 0.3% quarter on quarter, and Greece, the sick man in the UK, it's out of recession, according to them. That's right, forget about those 25+% unemployment rate. No, they're out of recession. What's a 50% youth unemployment rate? It says right here, they're out of recession. Greece emerged from nearly 6 years of recession by their economy expanding 0.7%. And you know why? Go back. Go way back. Yep, to September. EU, countries to begin counting drugs and prostitution as part of economic growth. I'm not making this up. The European Union policy mandated that member state untax shadow economies into account when calculating economic output in the coming months. Yeah, make up anything, man. I bet prostitution is really going great, and drugs can't find any jobs. Hey, that'll boost the economy. And over there in Italy, protests. Yep, several Italian cities, people taken to the streets, police beating them up. In Milan, the biggest one. Over in Rome, another one. Yep, gets better. Going on over there, too, in Greece. They're back out in the streets again, stun grenades, poof, rubber bullets, kill them all, no right to protest. We have 85 people in the world, the richest billionaires, that have as much dough as half of the world, 3.5 billion. Wonder why these people are protesting? How dare they? And gold, woo, wow, boom, bloop, bop. Up nice today, yeah. And oil's up a little bit, doesn't count for much. And Putin is the biggest gold bug, Bloomberg. That's right. Russia accounted for 59% of net gold purchases by central banks in the third quarter of this year. And when you look at the data even a little closer, you will see that Russia's gold stockpile is now bigger than China's, and fifth in the world after the U.S., Germany, France, and Italy. Well, you know what that is?
That was bullshit.
Pure bullshit, because they won't allow us to see what's in the vault in Fort Knox. And Germany, they ain't got it, man. What did you forget? That's right. It's still being held by the Federal Reserve, yeah. And over there in England, yeah, they can't have it. No, they're going to bring it back, but later. Can't show it to you. Watch what Russia's doing. They're doing this because, as you listen to their economics minister, they're concerned about geopolitical instability and the dollar. No, but you wouldn't know that when you go to the headlines right now at this time. Here we are. CNBC, gold slides towards $1,150 as dollar strengthens. Wow. Hey, you got it wrong, guys. Only about 4 hours too late with this one. And this is going to shock you. Hold on to your seats. Ukraine crisis risks spinning out of control. Samantha Powers says, whoa, hey, everybody stop and listen. Oh, she's speaking. Oh, and when they speak, they're wiser than anybody. We're just a bunch of stupid bastards. Out of control. It's almost 5,000 people killed over there. The war is raging, and the United States and NATO keep pumping it up. Is there a risk that the situation is getting out of control? Jesus said this yesterday. Yes, there is that risk. It is extremely worrying, period. That's right. And all you liberals, all you losers, all you Obama believers, keep drinking that Kool-Aid because they got that other one out there. Elizabeth Warren. Yeah, that senator from Massachusetts. The one that looks like the librarian that you couldn't stand, that was always punishing you for doing nothing. Yeah, her, bam, oh, bam, selling war. That's right. Iran is a significant threat to the United States and our allies. Iran is pursuing nuclear weapons. It is an active state sponsor of terrorism. Unlike the United States, we don't need any terrorism. We're the terrorists because we're in foreign countries slaughtering people. But go back to her quote, and its leaders have consistently challenged Israel's right to exist. There she is, man. Throwing down the crap. Yep. We need to continue our aggressive efforts against Al-Qaeda. Oh, yeah, them liberals. Those peace-loving liberals. You're a piece of shit. All of you. One after another. The Democratic Party. They're as murderous as the Republican Party. And here they are propping her up, man. If only the women were in charge. Yeah, peace and love. Yep. Occupy peace. Please do what you can to push this forward because you can see where they're taking us. You see the path. Yep. And we need to continue our support. You ready for this? Liberal assholes. Our support of intelligence, law enforcement, homeland security, and military professionals. Yeah, how about that, huh? Yeah, more robbing of our rights. Oh, like this little piece over here? Airplanes secretly track U.S. cell phones. Yeah, the Justice Department is scooping up data from thousands of mobile phones through devices deployed on airplanes that mimic cell phone towers. Isn't that great? What? Yo, yeah, and she wants more. Keep stealing our money, give it to the assholes in charge, and rob us of our rights, and you keep supporting it. It's the liberals that are destroying this country because they don't have the courage to admit that they believe in liars, murderers, and thieves. Don't forget to vote. Here we go. U.S. Justice Department admits it misled court about FBI's secret surveillance programs. Oh, and what does she want? She wants we need to continue our support for the efforts of our intelligence, law enforcement, homeland security, and military professionals. Misled. Oh, yeah, just like those misled, misdeeds, bullshit. And another story. Hey, about those professionals. Yeah, those great soldiers and them cops. Oh, yeah, they're really great professionals. What have they found with all of this money they spent? What have they done other than rob us of our rights? Hey, here's a story for you to show what a bunch of losers and liars they are. Intruder Report cites litany of errors. Yeah, you remember that guy that jumped over the White House fence? Yeah. The distractions included unclear radio transmissions and a distracted Secret Service agent who was on a personal call. Yeah, and the guy, when he ran in, the woman, she was also the Secret Service lady. He knocked her down, but she tried to tackle him. Oh, yeah. And one loser after another, spending all of his dough, and here's a bullshit story about what a bunch of jerk-offs they all are. They couldn't stop a guy from going in the White House, and you have her saying they have to rob more of our rights. Republicans and Democrats, murderers and thieves. And what else do we have here? Here we go. Pentagon mulls bigger U.S. troop role in Afghanistan. That's right. That's right. General Martin Dempsey and Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel. They want to expand military operations in Iraq and Syria. Isn't that great? More murder. More murder. Airstrikes blunt ISIS but draw civilian ire. Yeah, the people over there in Syria don't like their cities being bombed. They don't like all this destruction. It's an illegal war. We're at war and not even Congress is involved in it. Hey, I'm the commander-in-chief. This is a fascist country. I will do what I want to do. Yeah, between golf games and a little bit of basketball. And what else do we have here? Hey, this is great, man. Obama's over there in Myanmar. And here's the headline. Obama prods Myanmar back toward democracy. Could you imagine this? Could you imagine this? America going to another country, talking about democracy as we've lost it here? Hey, but why not? It's just another day of hypocrisy. One day of lies and bullshit after another. And here's what else Obama said. He said that it's the importance of all countries in the region to abide by rule-based norms and international laws. Yeah, like torturing people in Guantanamo. That's a wonderful international law. Hey, how about all those drone strikes? Shoo, rah, wah, bah, bam. International law. And they print this crap. They say it like this guy has a moral authority to say it. Yeah, isn't that wonderful, huh? Hey, Obama, what'd you forget about Israel breaking international law? That's okay. No, go over and preach. Amen, brother. Yes, we can. Yeah, hope. Yeah. Change you can believe in. Here's some. Afghanistan coalition convoy attack. Hey, the military said they're making progress. I guess they are. More attacks, huh? Oh, Libya. Bombs explode near embassies. Hey, great. Yeah, hey, Samantha Powers. Hey, a little problem over there, too. Your three witches, you remember Hillary, Samantha, and Susan Rice. Yep. Lovely job, ladies, for Libya. And what else? Fun?
Cut it short here, the interest of time. And I'm going to show you real quick a piece of a video from only the first few minutes from an interview by Russian television to Oliver Stone that I think is very interesting to hear, perspective of different people. That's why I like to listen to everybody.
So last week I had the great pleasure of having Academy Award-winning director Oliver Stone and historian Peter Kuznick on the show. They were here to talk about their new Showtime series and book called The Untold History of the United States. But the part you didn't see is the discussion we had after that interview, in which I got their opinion on Obama's policies, the current state of play in the United States. Take a look. So it took both of you 4 years to produce this series and
almost
the book.
5.
Almost 5. And in it, you have a chapter called Obama, Management of a Wounded Empire, where you give a harsh critique of the Obama administration. What, in your eyes, has been the most troubling aspects of his presidency, Oliver?
Well, I think that under the disguise of a sheep's clothing, he's been a wolf. That because the nightmare of the Bush presidency that preceded him, people forgave him a lot. He was a great hope for change. The color of his skin, the upbringing, the internationalism, the globalism seemed all evident. And he's an intelligent man. But he has taken all the Bush changes and he's basically put them into the establishment. He's codified them. That's what's sad. So we're going into a second administration that is living outside the law and does not respect the law as a foundation of our system. and he is a constitutional lawyer. You know, without the law, it's a law of the jungle. They say Nuremberg existed for a reason and there was a reason to have trials. There's a reason for a due process, habeas corpus, they call it in the United States.
Do you agree?
I agree totally.
Yeah.
If you look at his domestic policy, he didn't break with the Wall Street friendly policies of the Bush administration. If you look at his transparency, he claimed to be the transparency president when he was running for office. There hasn't been transparency. We've been actually classifying more documents under Obama than we did under Bush. All previous presidents between 1917 and 2008 indicted 3 people total under the Espionage Act. Obama has already indicted 6 people under the Espionage Act. The surveillance hasn't stopped. And the incarcerations without bringing people to trial hasn't stopped. So those policies have continued. And then the war policies and the militarization policies, we maintain that. We're fighting wars now in Yemen, Afghanistan. We're talking about keeping troops in Afghanistan. We haven't cut back on the things that we all found so odious about the Bush administration, and Obama has added some of his own. The drones policy, Obama had more drone attacks in his first 8 months than Bush had his entire presidency. And these are a very, very dubious international legality. And
Peter's more hopeful on the second term that there would be some more flexibility. We hope so, but there is a system in place that is enormous, the Pentagon system.
Yeah, it almost seems like he took the odious CIA policies and just branded them. So it's now acceptable that the assassinations, the extrajudicial judge, jury, executioner of people without due process. It's fascinating.
I mean, we complained during the Bush years that Bush was actually conducting surveillance without judicial review. Surveillance. Obama's killing people, targeted assassinations without judicial review. That to us is obviously much more serious.
Absolutely. And to the history, you cover Pearl Harbor, which of course led to the internment of Japanese American citizens. I don't think a lot of people really acknowledge that, once again, an underreported aspect of really what that meant. When you look at the surveillance grid in America today, it almost seems like it is an open-air internment camp where they don't need to intern people anymore because we have this grid set up in place. What do you guys think about that?
The U.S. government now intercepts more than 1.7 billion messages a day from American citizens. 1.7 billion. That's email, that's telephone calls, that's other forms of communication. Can you imagine that, 1.7 billion? We've got this apparatus set up now with hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people, over 1 million people with top security clearances. We've created this kind of nightmarish state. This is a 1984 kind of state in many ways. We say, well, Obama's trustworthy.
5 million clearances, 1 million top security clearances. That's a pretty heavy number. In other words, we are living in a fishbowl, and I think the sad part is that kids, the younger people, accept it. They're used to invade. They don't say, well, you know, and it's true. I mean, how can we follow the lives of everybody? But the truth is that we're all ultimately watching ourselves. It is an Orwellian state. It may not be oppressive on the surface, but in our hearts we have to have a certain. There's no place to hide. There's really no place to hide. Some part of you is going to end up in a database somewhere.
And it can become oppressive on the surface. One of the things we feared after 9/11 was that if there was a second terrorist attack like 9/11, the Constitution would be gone. I mean, the crackdown would be so egregious at that point, and there's still this obsessive fear. The United States fears things. We fear the rest of the world. We spend as much money on our military security intelligence as the rest of the world combined. You know,
I'm going to cut it short here. Well, I'm going to leave all these links so that people can look at it. But in the interest of time, we're going to move forward with the presentation. Here we're going to talk a little bit, going back and touch on the issue of racism and how it is used to shift public attention away from important geopolitical developments. And I want to point out that the president, he was obviously outraged about what happened with the Trayvon Martin trial and what happened in that particular in those particular race riots a few years ago. Understandable. I mean, it's a clear issue, a clear important issue. But here we have the case of a 16-year-old American from Colorado who the citizens of the United States, most of them don't know, was killed by a drone strike. And apparently his dad was a quote-unquote suspected militant, but there is no Justice Department evidence, or they never presented any evidence to support that particular drone strike or that particular assassination. In the case of the kid, 16-year-old, very intelligent, good grades, Muslim student, no evidence was presented. Nobody knew about it. Nobody was outraged. I mean, it's two American citizens, a lot of outrage over here, and here nobody knows about them. So, I mean, if I were to create a logo, I would say, all lives matter. We have also a good example here in Washington. Recently, the police killed a Mexican with his hands up, and you could. I'm not going to show the video, but you can go online and search and see, this kid being shot with his hands up and killed. The president didn't make a statement. He didn't come out and say, "Oh, that could have been me too." Why the selective, outrage? And we have to stand for everybody, including people in the Middle East and all of that. And he went from saying Trayvon Martin could have been me and getting into the politics of that trial to now calling the people that are rioting in Baltimore thugs and criminals. I mean, it's a clear pattern of just playing politics with national issues and international events. So I don't particularly believe or pay attention to anything he says. He's completely discredited in my view. And I asked the question: how about some serious gun control for the police, or background checks for those moderate Syrian rebels in the Middle East? Next slide is the old trick of humanitarian intervention. We are all familiar with all these wars and how the mainstream media lie to us and literally with actors to play with our emotions to take you to war. And that's exactly what we keep doing. Is the old trick of oh, we have to help these people. It's so awful what's happening, and all these dictators overseas killing their own people. I want to point out a few things in this slide. Is that the president wanted to bypass Congress on Syria, if you remember correctly. Back when he wanted to bomb Syria the first time, he wanted to do it by himself first, and then because of public outrage, he went to Congress, and Congress wasn't there with him, so the whole deal collapsed, and that's when they came up with the idea of the fake beheadings. But that's not how the system is supposed to work. You need to get Congress approval for wars. Obama is saying we're not going to send ground troops to these places, only thousands of advisors. I want to point out that that's a tactic used by Lyndon B. Johnson during the Vietnam War to call it advisors, and that's what they're calling it in Ukraine. But they have ground troops, they have military personnel, they have contractors there, and that's it's just playing with the public, essentially playing words with the public. And please look it up. It's not a new tactic. We all remember. That short clip, I can show you this, is real quick, of Madeleine Albright talking about how during the Clinton years, 500,000 kids is the estimate were killed due to the sanctions. And she's saying that the price of those 500,000 kids were worth it. And it's clearly a genocide. And what was worth is the question. What did we accomplish back then? And we're still going back and creating another mess in Iraq and Syria and all these places. The faulty intelligence excuse. This is the incompetence theory. People try to explain all these things are like, well, there are a bunch of incompetence and all this faulty intelligence, but it's okay. But remember, they all keep getting promoted. All the people involved in these military personnel and government officials involved in some of these messes keep getting promoted, and nobody ever goes to jail. So that should be a red flag. Gulf of Tonkin, Vietnam, faulty intelligence, 3 million deaths. Iraq, weapons of mass destruction scandal that we are all familiar with. Faulty intelligence again. They blame it on faulty intelligence. 1.5 million deaths. Syria chemical weapons attack. again, faulty intelligence, and we also watch the videos on how they are, coming up with, fake attacks and blaming it on the Assad government. 500,000 deaths so far and 3 million people displaced. Pearl Harbor, again, they blame it on faulty intelligence. They didn't know when the attack, they knew there was an attack coming, and they should have put the basing on high alert. If you don't know when the attack, obviously you don't know when it's coming, you put the base on high alert, and they didn't. And they never mentioned the fact that we imposed economic sanctions on Japan, and that was the trigger for that attack in Pearl Harbor. They blame it on faulty intelligence. 9/11, they are blaming it on faulty intelligence. And the weapons of mass destruction in Iran now, they claim that Iran is developing nuclear weapons, and maybe they are, but again, they don't have any proof, so they're just creating the environment to go after Iran, and that's always been in their plans. If we remember that video we just watched from General Wesley Clark, that it was always a plan to take over all these countries, 7 countries in 5 years, I think, if I remember correctly. So there you have it. It's a clear pattern of blaming it on faulty intelligence and incompetence, but they keep doing it, and they keep getting promoted, and they keep grabbing more. So the public is not familiar with the concept, I think, with the concept of deception. But if you sit down and think about it for a moment and think that people can actually be deceitful and deceive, in order to take you to war, and the videos we have been watching is an obvious example. Hey, maybe that is not all about the incompetence. So with this, we're going to move forward to the next slide. Yeah, I want to point out here, this slide is called Obama, I Killed Bin Laden speech, essentially. I'm not going to play the video, but you can go online and play it. And that was the Democrats' version of mission accomplished. He got Bin Laden. Everybody was very excited about. Very quick to take credit for it, but how about the weddings and the birthday parties that have been bombed from NBC News? Again, he recently apologized for a drone strike that killed some Americans, and there was a Pakistani general that came on Russian television and questioned why he was apologizing for all these Westerners that were killed by accident, and he never apologizes for all these many mistakes of killing 10 civilians for every bad person killed. So that's something to think about. Again, everybody say, oh, well, we had to go into Libya, Syria, Yemen, Ukraine now, but all of a sudden people are like, oh yeah, but the president is for peace now because he wants a peace deal with Iran. It doesn't make any sense until you start doing all this research. Here is a quote from the Ayatollah Khomeini in Iran. He calls Obama a liar, a deceptive person. And that's what the Russians call him, by the way, a deception. In this video, I have the link here. I'm not going to show it to you, but here is John Baker and Hillary Clinton joking about how they are planning about going into Iran, and laughing about it, like if it wasn't sort of joke to them. But Baker said something very important. There will be many adverse effects from an Israeli strike, because the plan, as we're going to show you in the next slide, the plan has always been to use deception to get into Iran. See, they don't have much credibility left, in my opinion, in the opinion of a lot of people. So back in 2009, they were planning, this is from the Brookings Institute, by the way. They were essentially, it's a paper, all these organizations like the Council on Foreign Relations and the Trilateral Commission, all these people get together, come up with these ideas on how to do this, how to do that. And in this case, it was a plan called Which Path to Persia? Options for a New American Strategy Towards Iran. And I'm going to read some of what the plan is, but there is the link, and you can go read it entirely. It's a whole document, and you can go to the original at the Brookings Institute and read it for yourself. But it says, any military operation against Iran will likely be very unpopular around the world and require the proper international context, both to ensure the logistical support the operation will require and to minimize the blowback from it. The best way to minimize international opprobrium and maximize support, however, grudging or covert, is to strike only when there is a widespread conviction that the Iranians were given but then rejected a superb offer, one so good that only a regime determined to acquire nuclear weapons and acquire them for the wrong reason would turn it down. Under those circumstances, the United States or Israel could portray its operation as taken in sorrow, not anger, and at least some in the international community would conclude that the Iranians brought it onto themselves by refusing a good deal. So you see Obama, playing all this game and saying, "Oh yeah, we finally have an Iranian peace deal." I would be very surprised if it is for real, based on what they've been writing in the past and what the plans has always been. So it turns out recently, as recent as 2 days ago, that as part of this so-called peace deal, they're selling lots of airplanes and military hardware to all this region, and the Russians are upset because the Americans are taking a lot of their business. In the case of the Russians, they want to sell S-300 missiles to Iran, but they can't because the United States is upset. But now Obama is cutting up all this deal in support for the so-called peace deal, selling airplanes and high-tech weapons to Saudi Arabia and all these countries. So here I'm going to read here a part that is very important. Allowing or encouraging an Israeli military strike, the most salient advantage of this option has to offer that of an American air campaign is the possibility that Israel alone will be blamed for the attack. And that's going back to what Jim Baker said. They are planning on letting Israel do the attack, so then say, "Oh, yeah, we have no choice. We have to support Israel. Now we have to fight a war." If this proves true, then the United States might not have to deal with the Iranian retaliation or the diplomatic backlash that would accompany an American military operation against Iran. It could allow Washington to have its cake, delay Iran's acquisition of a nuclear weapon, and eat it too, avoid undermining many other U.S. regional diplomatic initiatives. It's a deception. And that's what they're doing. And the people are swallowing it whole, that we have a peace deal, everything is fine, see how peaceful this president is. And so there you have it. And if you do more research, you can find out even more information that they are relying on deception to accomplish what they have in mind. And this is a plan that is been in the works for 10, 15, 20 years. So again, talking about the liberal media that is, pro-peace, and we are so different than the Republicans, and the Republicans are a bunch of racists. This is a short article from Washington's blog, George Washington blog on the internet. It's a great place to go look for information. But they're talking about an article here in the Washington Post, which is a traditionally liberal newspaper. And the title is, "War with Iran is probably our best option." So they're a liberal newspaper promoting war and selling, that it's only our only option to deal with Iran. Again, they're not different than the Republicans. They're, warmongers, take money from everybody, do the same kind of things, do the same kind of deception. And this guy from the Washington blog, they make fun of the article. They were saying, "Can you imagine the response if the headline had been, 'Racism is probably our best option,' or 'Rape is probably our best option,' or 'Child abuse is probably our best option'?" They point out that war propaganda is illegal under the International Covenant on Civic and Political Rights, and war itself is illegal under the Kellogg-Briand Pact and the United Nations Charter, but the Washington Post isn't one to worry about legal niceties. We have another guy that writes for the Oregonian also from time to time, economist Paul Krugman, who he won a Nobel Prize in economics, and he's a well-known liberal warmonger. He advocates spending on the military to bring the economy up to speed, and he went even to suggest that we could propose. He proposed to create a fake alien invasion. It's a crazy idea, and you have to watch the original video because I don't know how somebody with a Nobel Prize can suggest these kind of things, but to justify a massive military buildup to end the 2008 recession. And I have links, and you can go search all these things. Another example here, this one is very interesting. This is from the New York Times. For those people that rely and get the Times magazine and the New York Times and don't know, how much propaganda they're getting. Another warmonger organization. An article from Global Research, and in this article they were talking about this particular op-ed by Thomas Friedman, which is a notorious warmonger. And this guy was calling to arm ISIS, to arm a terrorist organization to destabilize Iran. Isn't that interesting that we've been hearing about all these terrorists and all of that, and now here is a military-industrial complex mouthpiece proposing to arm terrorists to destabilize Iran. So they've been doing this for a long time. If you remember, Reagan had the freedom fighters in Latin America, Jimmy Carter's Mujahideen in Afghanistan. We saw a brief video of Brzezinski and how they funded the Mujahideen. Obama has the Syrian moderate rebels. And John McCain is supporting the open, out-of-the-closet neo-Nazis in Ukraine. And, now ISIS, can you spot a pattern here? I'm going to read it from the article. It says, Thomas Friedman represents Washington and Obama's preferred method of imperialist war. Friedman calls on Washington to arm ISIS to destabilize Iran, an objective that has been in the decades in the works. His primary argument that U.S. and Israeli interests are best served with direct support to ISIS is a lie. It's a lie not because the argument is false, but because the argument itself has been a long-standing U.S. policy. It's a deception, and it's a clear deception. That's what they rely on. That's why Obama has been so effective in selling, war and selling the same things that Bush was doing. And everybody knows about this. We here in America don't know what's going on, but from December last year to February of this year, numerous reports from Russia, Iraq, and Iran, is important, accused the U.S. government of providing direct support to ISIS in Iraq. So what this guy is proposing is being done already. He's just selling that to the public. But that's how they operate, I want to touch briefly, we're almost done with the presentation, but I want to touch briefly on how, again, the issue of racism is used to get people to fight each other and to argue and never to look up to the real problem. And again, I have, I used to listen to Rachel Maddow, and I'm kind of, disappointed with the things that she covers and the things that she doesn't cover. And it seems like she's always talking about hate, and the Republicans are a bunch of racists, and it's not that the Republicans are saints. I mean, obviously they have lots of issues, apart in disarray, and you name it. There are racist people there, you name it. But here's an example of what propaganda looks like. In the case of what happened at Bundy Ranch in Nevada, I believe it was. It's a good example on how they use, what a guy said to distract attention from the big issues. She was saying, they were racist, anti-government, right-wing, extremist, malicious teabaggers. She called the people from the Tea Party teabaggers and libertarians at Bundy Ranch. Important, if you're not familiar with this kind of rhetoric and this kind of propaganda, that the government implemented a no-fly zone over that ranching family's house. And apparently that wasn't an issue with her. Also, it was reported on the Washington Times that Obama was planning a military strike at the Bundy Ranch. Apparently that wasn't a big issue to her. We're talking about human beings here. And the government overreach and police militarization apparently hasn't been a big problem to Rachel Maddow, but she's used, I'm pretty sure, by the establishment to distract attention from far more important issues. And that's one of the big points of propaganda: distracting attention or withholding facts. And it's interesting because I remember hearing what that guy Bundy was saying in Nevada, and he said some words that probably were out of place, but he talked so highly of the Mexican population, how good workers they are, and they come here and they have better families, that he said, I'm quoting, better than we white people. And it's like if they were accusing him of being a racist, maybe he is, but it didn't make a whole lot of sense when you listen to the whole speech, which is on the internet. And that's the kind of rhetoric that have caused MSNBC to lose about 45% of their viewership in just 1 year alone. Their ratings are crashing because people are, they want to hear something that is not the usual hate mongering and fear mongering and making it always a racial issue. I have a question for Mado. She covers what happened there, and a lot of people on MSNBC spend a lot of time talking about what happened, in that particular case. But we have, in the case of, there were armed militias there at Bundy Ranch, but here we have another armed militia, that in this case are African Americans, were calling to kill white cops. And it didn't receive many media attention from MSNBC. I mean, it's a clear, they're calling for violence. And, if the white militias are bad, why, cover be equal? So anyways, question number 2 for Rachel Maddow is that she covers graphic videos of the Assad atrocities and Gaddafi's atrocities and all of that, but she rarely covers, drone strikes. And when you go on the web and you see, a picture of a kid with his guts spread all over the street, they do it because they don't show that because they know, obviously, that it's going to be, there is going to be a big public backlash. So she's clearly part of that system. Don't listen to her, in my opinion. That's what I recommend people. And I ask a question, where does this twisted logic that now, if you belong to the Tea Party, you're a libertarian, you're a Republican, or you're, Occupy Wall Street, that you're a racist? Because I keep hearing from a lot of people saying, these people are even worse racists than the Republicans. And I'm like, what is the statistical evidence? Maybe the heads of these parties are racist. Maybe all these movements have been corrupted or bought, but that doesn't mean that the people behind it, the people that are actually part of the public, that everybody is think that way. So there is a lot of political infighting. And over here, maybe I won't show this, but we have a short video of this guy, Bill Myers. In my opinion, he's a clear racist, talking about the Muslims and calling all Muslims violent and making jokes of them. And people, the right, like to look at him like some sort of good figure, he's a liberal. But they never accuse him of what he is. He's a clear racist, in my opinion. If you hear this particular speech, you will see what we're talking about. A little word on NPR. NPR is pure government-funded propaganda. I think it's one of the most sophisticated operations out there on PSYOPs, and we all remember, how the military, the 4th Psychological Operations Group, were involved with in that scandal with CNN and NPR being infiltrated by military personnel to sell you war. Just a quick note on Democracy Now! I tend to like Democracy Now! I look at I listen to everybody. And they cover a lot of subjects that are not covered by the other mainstream media, and they look more open and more fair. And I still watch them, as I said. But here is 2 important facts. You always have to follow the money. And she's this lady, Amy Goodman, and Democracy Now! Is an institution. They're getting funding from George Soros, the Ford Foundation, and the typical usual oligarch out there. And it's like the Democrats taking money from all the Wall Street and the military-industrial complex. If you want to keep an image of being impartial, you got to watch from who you take money. In the case of George Soros, he's known as the man who broke the Bank of England. He's a billionaire, and he's well known for funding color revolutions overseas. So this is a guy who played geopolitics, and he's a master at it. And he's currently contributing $1 billion to the Ukraine neo-Nazi government. Please check this. This has been in the news for a while now. So always listen to everybody, read everything, and believe nothing until you can prove it with your own research. And this is the end of the presentation. I want to point out that if you're interested in learning more about all these subjects, we try to compress information. We realize there is a lot to learn, and not everybody has the time to read a book, watch a documentary, This is a big puzzle. So we ask people to, maybe every half hour you go and instead of watching House of Cards, you go watch a documentary. Whatever you decide is good for you. Well, we created one for the in relation to the militarization of police as an aftermath of 9/11, which is on YouTube and is really good. I provide the link here, and with information that you can also go verify. And in there, you can see, how close we could be to a civil war here in this country. You can hear from the militias themselves talking about what's going on and how they view the federal government and the federal government's preparation for some sort of emergency, and the public also. And we also created another presentation called 9/11 Aftermath and how it relates to current geopolitical development. This is the part that I'm more concerned about because I think we are very close to a global scale conflict. So if you feel interested, some of these presentations are a little bit long, but if you, watch them in half-hour increments, I think you will find them very, very interesting. Instead of perhaps reading a book if you don't have time, or instead of doing all this research, we try to compress it to make it easy for the public to learn in a easy to understand way what's really going on. So with this, I conclude my presentation. Thank you for coming, and hope to see you next time.